Chapter 12:23. The warm sunlight shone down from the sky and shone on the seemingly endless plains. The earth seemed to be dyed with a layer of golden color. It was unusually dazzling. At a certain moment, on the edge of such a plain, a group of people riding horses quietly appeared. It was a group of people wearing completely different equipment. Rather than a group of people, it was better to say that it was a group of people forced together by several groups of people to move together. The number of these people was about 200. Moreover, they were basically all men. And these people all had one thing in common. That was, on their necks, they all wore a metal plate. Some wore metal plates made of silver. Some wore metal plates made of gold. There were even some who were wearing precious metal plates made of platinum. Under the sunlight, the metal plates glowed with dazzling colors. In this world, there was only one kind of human who would wear metal plates like this. That was the adventurers. These people riding horses, galloping from the edge of the plain, were all adventurers. Moreover, they were adventurers who were at least silver level and above. In such a group of adventurers who were at least silver level, there were also gold level adventurers, and there were even platinum level adventurers. This was a very rare scene. Because, generally speaking, whether it was a kingdom, an empire, or a theocracy, the adventurers of platinum level and above accounted for about 20% of the adventurers in the country. And in the kingdom, the number of adventurers was about 3,000 people. Based on this ratio, in the kingdom, there were only about 600 adventurers of platinum level and above. In this way, perhaps it did not reflect the preciousness of the adventurers of platinum level and above. But if this data was compared to the population of the kingdom, it was much more obvious. According to estimates, the total population of the kingdom was more than 8 million. Among these 8 million people, there were only 3,000 adventurers, and only 600 adventurers of platinum level and above. If this was the case, then it was understandable, right? That was right. There were so few adventurers of platinum level and above. But in this group of people, there were at least 30 platinum level adventurers. In addition to the rest of the silver level and gold level adventurers, the strength of the group was already to the point that it was not strange to use them in a war. But this was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that at the front of this group of people, there were 3 adventure teams wearing even more noble metal plates. It was a metal plate made of mithril. In other words, at the front of this group of people, there were 3 mithril adventure teams that were above platinum level adventurers. Kralgla, Sky Wolf, Rainbow. These 3 teams of mithril adventurers were the strongest adventure teams in Yelantir. However, Yelantir didn't have any mountain copper rank that was higher than mithril rank. As for the highest grade, the fine steel grade, there were only 2 in the entire kingdom. It was even more impossible for Yelantil to have one. Yelantir's adventurers teams, Yelantir's adventure teams, Yelantir of Yelantir's adventure teams, Yelantir, Yelantir. In this way, the leaders of the 3 mithril adventure teams became the leaders of the entire adventure team. They were the 3 strong men who took the lead and charged at the front of the large group. Kralgla's leader, Igvalk. Sky Wolf's leader, Pilati. Rainbow's leader, Moknak. The leaders of the 3 mithril adventure teams showed their leadership at this time. They rode their horses and rode at the front of the large group, leading the large group of adventurers that totaled more than 200 as they galloped on the boundless plains. Rumble. Numerous sounds of horse hooves converged together, forming a rumbling sound that made the earth tremble. Dense smoke and dust rose behind the group of horses as the large adventure team galloped, filling the space of the plains. Looking at the vast momentum, it really gave people a feeling that even if they were fighting on the battlefield, these 200 people would be able to flatten a vast army. It was precisely because this large group of adventurers was so large that some people were puzzled. Such a large group, it should be enough to go against the army of the Empire, right? Igvalk smacked his lips. It's just to deal with a mere monster, is there a need to mobilize such a large group of adventurers? In order to better suppress monsters and prevent humans from being harmed by monsters, almost every city's adventurers guild would regularly organize magic chanters who were proficient in intelligence magic to explore the surrounding areas of the city. From there, they would find the settlements of various monster tribes and the location of powerful monsters. A few days ago, the Adventurers Guild just happened to conduct a survey. As a result, they found that there was an individual with an astonishing magic reaction in this area. That terrifying magic reaction was definitely not at the level that a human could have. And after further investigation, the Adventurers Guild also confirmed. That individual was not a human, but an undead that hated the living. Therefore, the entire Adventurers Guild fell into chaos and an emergency meeting was held. Those who participated in the meeting were not only the Guild Master of the Adventurers Guild, but also the Guild Master of the Mages Guild and the Mayor of the city in Ylantir, as well as the leaders of the 3 most advanced mithril adventure teams in the city. After a round of discussion, the entire upper echelon of Ylantir felt that it was too dangerous to allow the undead with an astonishing magic reaction to continue existing. The undead generally hated the living. If they were allowed to continue existing, perhaps the other party would use its terrifying power to carry out a massacre in the surroundings, to the extent that it would threaten the safety of the entire Ylantir city. In view of this, the Adventurers Guild, the Mages Guild, and the mayor of the city all decided to jointly fund and hire a large number of high-level adventurer teams, including 3 mithril adventurer teams, to form a large team to crusade against the monster that appeared near Khan village. Igvok had always felt disdain towards this. It's just an undead, not a giant snake monster. Isn't it too much of a fuss to actually mobilize so many people? The undead were basically born from death. Moreover, in the beginning, it was basically impossible for an overly powerful undead to be born. The existence of the undead was actually like a venomous worm. Only in a large number of undead would there be a high possibility of an even more powerful undead being born. Therefore, under normal circumstances, the powerful undead would be surrounded by an extremely large number of low-level undead. There were very few powerful undead that existed individually. Therefore, knowing that the opponent this time was only a single undead, Igvok was so disdainful. It had to be said that Igvok's arrogant speech made the leaders of the other 2 mithril adventure teams very unhappy. Moreover, this was not the first time Igvok had spoken like this. At that moment, Parodi and Moknak, who were also the leaders, looked at each other and said what they had said countless times before. Since the Adventurers Guild and the Mages Guild have already used the intelligence magic to confirm, then there's definitely no mistake. We can't be careless. Otherwise, it wouldn't be strange if we were to die at any time. Igvalki let out a cold snort when he heard Parodi and Moknak's words. I say, no matter what, you guys are the leaders of mithril adventure teams like me. Isn't it too embarrassing to be so afraid of an undead? Such a sentence made Parodi and Moknak furious. However, considering the harmony of the team, the leaders of the 2 mithril adventure teams chose to tolerate it. After all, they were not as arrogant and foolish as Igvok. Let's cut the crap, Parodi said with a straight face. We're almost at our destination. If we continue to complain, it would be too embarrassing for us as adventurers. It's time for the people behind to prepare for battle, Moknak said in a similarly unfriendly tone. Don't be caught off guard by the enemy and cause unnecessary casualties. Igvok turned his head away without saying anything. However, when he turned his head away, Igvok was suddenly startled and exclaimed in surprise. What's that? As soon as he said that. Whang! A huge magic light beam suddenly shot out from the front. Chapter 12:24. Amidst the reverberations of space, a gigantic magical beam that was about 2 meters in diameter abruptly appeared over the boundless plains. It cut through space, rubbing against the air as it streaked straight towards the group of adventurers. The group of adventurers didn't even have time to react before the huge mana beam suddenly shot over and landed on the ground not far in front of Igvalki, Parodi, and Moknak. The sudden appearance of the magical beam didn't directly bombard the ground. Instead, it was like a laser that swept across the ground in front of the group of adventurers. Boom! 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 In an instant, wherever the laser-like magic power beam swept across the ground was blasted apart, setting off astonishing shockwaves and sand. Pieces of gravel shot out in all directions like bullets fired from a gun. The sudden huge commotion caused the horses carrying the adventurers to let out frightened neighs. Without the consent of the riders, they abruptly stopped, straightened their upper bodies, and kicked their powerful front legs in midair. The adventurers riding on the horses all fell down one by one due to the violent movements of the horses in a state of panic and landed heavily on the ground, letting out painful groans. In just a short while, the group of adventurers who were advancing on the plains like a vast army fell into a state of panic. Some of the adventurers were even trampled by the violent horses. If it weren't for the fact that these adventurers were strong and equipped with a certain degree of equipment, they would definitely have been injured under the hooves of the horses. Now, they were considered lucky that they were only in a state of chaos. Don't panic. Parodi, who also fell from his horse, hurriedly yelled. Everyone, calm down. Quickly adjust your posture. Prepare for battle. Moknak also yelled. It's very likely that the enemy has already attacked. From this point of view, Parodi and Moknak were indeed the leaders of the Secret Silver Adventurers team. They were calm in the face of danger and had the mentality to deal with any unexpected situation. Only Igvalki, instead of paying attention to his companions, focused more on the attacker who made a fool of himself. Who's there? Igvalki roared furiously at his surroundings. Who's playing tricks here? Come out! Igvalki's voice turned into an echo that reverberated in the sky above the plains. About 2 to 3 seconds later, a voice that was so cold that it was close to terrifying reverberated in the space in response to Igvalki's words. How dare you speak to our Supreme Honorable like that? You deserve to die. Along with this sentence, a terrifying evil aura expanded in the entire space. It was a terrifying aura like that of a ferocious ghost that emerged from hell. Bathed in such a terrifying aura, all the adventurers from Erlanter present stiffened. Their faces turned ghastly pale in an instant. They looked as though they were being stared at by a ferocious beast and didn't even dare to move. Soon after, the sand and dust that filled the entire space gradually settled down, allowing the frozen adventurers to see the scene in front of them clearly. It was only then that all the adventurers present saw it. There was a rock about 100 meters in front of them. There were figures standing around the rock. Although they were more than 100 meters away, the adventurers could still see the full appearance of those figures clearly. The first thing that caught the attention of all the adventurers present was a figure that made all the pale-faced adventurers widen their eyes in shock. It was a young girl. She seemed to be guarding the side of the rock and was standing under the rock. She was the closest to the rock. The young girl's appearance could be said to be breathtaking. She was so beautiful that it was truly tragic. She even had a gentle smile on her face, as though she was a goddess that descended from the sky. However, behind such a goddess, there was a pair of pitch-black wings near her lower waist. It was that pair of pitch-black wings that made all the adventurers tremble. Looking at that beautiful figure that was both sacred and evil, Parodi inadvertently murmured. Demon. Demon. A demon that brought destruction with violence. A demon that brought about depravity with wisdom. This kind of otherworldly existence was collectively known as the demon. It was said that it was an extremely ferocious and evil demon. The meaning of its existence was to eliminate all the good people who had reason. It was also the so-called synonym for evil. Among the people present, there was almost no one who didn't know about the existence of the demon. It was because more than 200 years ago, it brought a huge disaster to the world and was finally eliminated by the 13 heroes. The evil existence known as the demon god was the king of the demon. This demon king led an army of demons and almost wiped out all the intelligent races in this world. If the undead were demons that hated the living, then the demon would be demons that tortured the living. If they encountered the undead, they would at most die. But if they encountered the demon, they would truly be better off dead. Who wouldn't be afraid of such an existence? What's more, the demon there wasn't just the unbelievably beautiful young girl alone. Not far from the girl, there was a man with a long steel tail, wearing a strange suit, and looking like an ordinary human male. Although he looked like a human male, the steel tail behind him and the evil aura that pervaded his body told everyone present that he wasn't a human. He was definitely not a human, but a demon. On the other side of the demon couple, on the other side of the rock, there was a pair of dark elf twins. A pair of demons. A pair of dark elves. The two waited on both sides of the rock, facing forward. Furthermore, there were two other figures standing there. One of them was an old man who was over 50 years old and wore a butler's uniform, but his back was extremely straight. The other had a terrifying appearance. His appearance was like an ant, but also like an insect, and his entire body was covered in the color of ice. These people surrounded the ordinary-looking rock in the middle as if they were protecting something. They expressionlessly looked in the direction of the adventurers. Then, on the rock surrounded by these beings, a person sat on it. It was a young man with black hair and black eyes, wearing pitch-black casual clothes and a white coat. Compared to the existences below the rock, the young man didn't have a terrifying appearance. However, judging from the support of those terrifying existences, the young man sitting at the top was clearly the one who was leading those terrifying existences. Cold sweat began to appear on the foreheads of the adventurers. The people surrounding the rock emitting terrifying existences and evil auras made the adventurers wail in their hearts, and they constantly had the urge to escape. Such fear made Igvalki shout out loud. "You! Who are you people?" Such a sentence made the evil aura of those terrifying existences surge even more intensely. Mere ants of a lower race. Demiurgos pushed up his glasses and looked up. "Kneel." Just as Demiurgos' voice reverberated in the space of the plains, the adventurers who were at least silver rank and above all felt their hearts tremble, and their bodies involuntarily moved. Accompanied by a series of sounds, the adventurers, including Igvalki, Pilati, and Moknak, who could rival an army, all involuntarily knelt on the ground. It wasn't because these adventurers were so timid that they were frightened by Demiurgos' words. Instead, Demiurgos' words contained a magical power that none of them could resist. "This is..." Moknak's expression changed drastically. "Spiritual attack." Yes. The reason why the adventurers involuntarily knelt was because Demiurgos had a special ability to make others listen to his orders' domination spell. Looking at the group of adventurers kneeling in unison, Noah, who was sitting on the rock, spoke indifferently. "Adventurers, return to where you belong." Chapter 12:25. Adventurers, return to where you belong. When such a sentence was carried by the wind and drilled into the ears of the adventurers who were kneeling on the ground and were unable to get up no matter what, those adventurers were all startled. Noah, on the other hand, ignored those adventurers' startled expressions and continued speaking as if he was talking to himself. "I know that you intend to deal with the undying that appeared here, but that undying is my servant, and not someone that you should deal with." Servant. The adventurers led by Igvalki, Parodi, and Moknak revealed shocked expressions. In this world, the meaning of the word servant was not ordinary. Usually, if a human called a magical creature their servant, then under normal circumstances, the servant here referred to the summoned magical creature. Just like the Holy Book of Sunlight of the Lien cult, the angels summoned by the magic chanters of the faith system who were at least able to use third-grade magic were their servants. Similar situations were not rare. Summoning magic existed in every system of magic. Some magic chanters could use summoning magic to summon goblins. Some magic chanters could use summoning magic to summon ogres. Some magic chanters could use summoning magic to summon lizardmen. Even in legends, there were magic chanters who could use summoning magic to summon the most powerful race, the giant dragon. All kinds of magical creatures could be summoned by magic chanters, and controlled and ordered through corresponding magic. Among them, it naturally included the Undying. However, the more powerful the magical creature was, the more advanced the summoning magic would be required to summon it and control it. Now, that human sitting on the rock was saying that the powerful Undying that made the entire Yelanders higher-ups tremble, and that they did not hesitate to send out 3 Mithril adventurer teams, 5 Platinum-ranked adventurer teams, 10 Gold-ranked adventurer teams, and 30 Silver-ranked adventurer teams, to form a team of more than 200 people, to go on a crusade, was his servant. To be able to summon a magical creature of that level, what kind of magic was that? Thinking of this, all the adventurers trembled. This was because, as previously mentioned, the level of adventurers and the level of magic corresponded. Bronze and Iron adventurers were generally equivalent to magic chanters who could use first-grade magic. Silver and Gold adventurers were generally equivalent to magic chanters who could use second-grade magic. Platinum-ranked and Mithril adventurers were generally equivalent to magic chanters who could use third-grade magic. Platinum-ranked adventurers were generally equivalent to magic chanters who could use fourth-grade magic. Adventurers of the highest level were generally equivalent to magic chanters who could use fifth-grade magic. The strength of the magical creatures summoned by different levels of summoning magic could also be applied to this classification system. First-grade magic could summon magic chanters of bronze or iron level. Second-grade magic could summon of silver or gold-ranked silver to summon silver, or based on this logic, a fourth-grade summoning spell would be able to summon a bronze-grade monster, while a fifth-grade summoning spell would be able to summon a steel-grade monster. Even the Adventurers Guild had no choice but to send out 3 Mithril adventurers to lead a crusade against it. No matter how one looked at it, it should be stronger than Mithril adventurers, right? And to send out such a large number of adventurers, it couldn't just summon magic of bronze level, right? It was even possible that magic of bronze level was stronger than magic of steel level. Summoning magic that could summon magic of bronze level. Conservatively speaking, it had to be the highest level of magic that humans could control, which was the 6th grade magic of bronze level. This youth, who looked to be around 20 years old, was a magic chanter who could use 6th grade magic. That's impossible. Igvalki cried out loudly. There is no one who can use 6th grade magic in the kingdom. There is only one in the empire. Do you think I will believe your nonsense? Igvalk's words made the NPCs guarding the Nasaric tomb next to the rock Noah was sitting on focus their gazes on him. Those gazes were filled with an unprecedented murderous aura. Igvalk, who was only secret silver level and had not even reached level 20, was targeted by the murderous aura of 6 level 100 NPCs. His vision turned black, and his chest tightened. His blood began to surge. If this continued, Igvalki would definitely spit out a mouthful of blood, right? Fortunately, Noah's voice saved Igvalk. Whether you believe it or not has nothing to do with me. I am just giving you some advice because I know a few people in the kingdom who are also adventurers. Noah glanced at Igvalk. There is a problem with my servant. She no longer obeys my orders. I can't control her for the time being. If you want to come over, I won't stop you. But what happens to you has nothing to do with me. All of the NPCs in Nazarik's underground tomb smiled at the sight of this. It was a smile that was directly linked to cruelty. That smile made all the adventurers feel like they were not far from death. For a moment, they were completely frozen in place, unable to move. The only ones who could remain calm were Pilati and Moknak. The leaders of the 2 secret silver adventurers looked at each other, then looked at Noah. Parodi carefully asked as if he was offering his respect. Can we ask for your name, sir? Why? Noah looked at Pilati with a faint smile. Since you can't resist, you should at least find out about my background and report back. Pilati's expression froze. Obviously, Noah was right. We definitely don't mean to suspect you, Moknak quickly spoke up for Pilati. We just want to know the name of the person who can have such a powerful undying as your servant. Alright, there is no need for flattery. I am just giving you a piece of advice, Noah said indifferently. Moreover, my servant is now under the control of an unknown spirit. I am also worried about how to deal with her. I don't want to be disturbed by outsiders. Do you understand what I mean? Noah pursed his lips. Or rather, you can do me a big favor and help me investigate the situation of that disobedient servant. Pilati and Moknak immediately shut their mouths. Only Igvalki stared at Noah with resentment. The fear in his heart turned into extreme anger under Noah's superior attitude, causing him to mock him. I think you are a human traitor who defected to the Undying. You plan to collude with the Undying to harm us humans, right? The NPCs in the Nazarick underground tomb suddenly raised their heads. Their eyes were filled with violent murderous intent again. However, this time, before the NPCs in the Nazarick underground tomb locked their murderous intent on Igvalki, Noah looked directly at the guy who did not even understand that a wise man submits to circumstances. If humans are as stupid as you, then there must be many traitors who want to defect to the Undying, right? Igvalki's eyes were filled with anger. Just as he was about to say something, Noah beat him to it. Anyway, that's all I want to say. If you don't want to die, it's best that you don't come here. Go back to Elantir and tell the people of the kingdom not to interfere with the matters here. After saying that, Noah looked at Igvalki. His pitch-black eyes suddenly turned a cold, silver-white color. Also, you really make people feel very uncomfortable. As these words were spoken, Igvalki's body gradually turned into steel under the gaze of the ice-cold silver-white eyes. What? What is this? No. Stop. Ah! As he screamed, Igvalki turned into cold steel. The fear on his face froze, and he became a statue. Ah! The group of adventurers finally let out sorrowful cries out of fear. Chapter 12:26. On the rock, Noah looked at the group of adventurers riding their horses at a speed faster than when they came, as if they were running for their lives. His expression did not change much from the beginning to the end. Lord Noah, Demiurgos said softly. Forgive me for being blunt, but why didn't Lord Noah kill all those inferior humans? Most of the NPCs in Nazarick's underground tomb nodded in agreement. They had the same idea as Demiurgos. Because of Zacia's matter, Noah had the people of Nazarick's underground tomb completely seal off the surrounding area. Even though it was just a vast grassland, who knew how many monsters from Nazarick's underground tomb were hiding here? Just now, if Noah hadn't appeared and the human adventurer stepped into this area, the monsters hiding in the dark would have suddenly launched an attack and killed all the adventurers. No one doubted that any of the adventurers would be able to escape. After all, compared to the monsters in the underground tomb, the humans in this world were generally not very strong. Even Good Jifu, who was known as the strongest warrior in the kingdom, was only level 35. Among the humans, there wasn't even a single magician who could use 7th level spells. How could they fight against the monsters in the underground tomb? In Nazarick's underground tomb, even the monsters that could respawn and appear on their own were only around level 30. With the power of humans, they were no match for most of the magical creatures that could regenerate and appear on their own, not to mention the high-level magical creatures that required money to summon. The monster that had sealed off the area was precisely this type of high-level monster. Among them, the lowest level was level 60, and the highest was level 85. Moreover, there were more than 300 level 60 monsters. Although there weren't that many level 85 monsters, there were still 3 lying in ambush around Satya. In this world, there was almost no one who could break through such a force. It would be very easy for them to kill the human adventurers who weren't even level 20. The NPCs in Nazarik's underground graveyard couldn't understand why Noah would show up and let these people go. In response, Noah did not hide anything and directly spoke his thoughts. I already said that it's just a piece of advice. I'll only do it this once. After saying that, Noah looked at Igvaki, who had turned into cold steel, and closed his eyes. If they ignore my words and still want to come, then I won't be merciful. Noah really couldn't stand the indiscriminate killing of the innocent. That was why Noah had specially made a trip to give the adventurers a piece of advice. Now, he had given the advice. If the adventurers didn't intend to listen and still wanted to interfere, then Noah wouldn't be so idle as to put on airs in front of them. To this extent, he had already done his utmost benevolence. Everyone had to be responsible for their own choices. It was just like how Noah had chosen to let the NPCs in the underground tomb of Nasarik capture the people of the Celian theocracy alive. In the end, it caused Satya to be mentally dominated and fall to the point where she had no choice but to fight with Satya. Demiurgos. At that moment, Noah asked Demiurgos softly. The defense network should be more or less built, right? Yes. Demiurgos lowered his head and bowed slightly. Whether it's the defensive wall to block intelligence magic or teleportation magic, it has been built. The magic traps and magic tools have also been set up. In addition, the monsters in the underground tomb of Nasarik have sealed the surrounding area. Considering the power of the creatures in this world, we can rest assured that we can act on Satya's matter. Is that so? Noah continued to ask. Then, have you investigated clearly? If you come into contact with Satya, will it trigger the same mental domination power? We haven't investigated clearly yet. Demiurgos seemed to find it difficult to speak, as if blaming himself for not doing a good job. He lowered his head even more. Although we haven't discovered anything yet, we can't rule out the possibility that if we come into contact with Satya, the world-class tool that can control Satya's mind won't be triggered and affect the people who come into contact with her. Is that so? Noah opened his eyes, looked in Satya's direction, and murmured. You still can't be sure. I'm really sorry. Demiurgos bowed deeply. Lord Noah, please give me a little more time. 3 days will be enough. I'll definitely give the Supreme Lord a satisfactory answer. No need, Noah said indifferently. You don't have to interfere with Satya's matter. Let me handle it. Wah. Demiurgos' expression changed. It wasn't just Demiurgos. Even the other NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nasarik were shocked. Please wait. Heartwarming stepped forward and hurriedly said. That's too dangerous. That's right. Lord Noah. Yauda also hurriedly said. We haven't confirmed whether the same mental domination power will affect the people who come into contact with that idiot Satya, right? That's too dangerous, Malay said timidly. Lord Noah, why don't you reconsider? This subordinate also thinks that it's inappropriate, Seabass said seriously. If Lord Noah is also affected by mental domination, what should we do? There's no reason for the Supreme Lord to personally take the risk, Khassid said in a deep voice. Even if we want to suppress Satya, we should be the ones to do it. The NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nasarik all voiced their objections. The objections made Noah smile bitterly. I'll tell you the truth, Noah looked at the NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nasarik and said. Mental domination is ineffective against me, even if it's the power of a world item. The reason why they were so sure was because Noah had 2 special characteristics. The first was the curse resistance of the God Slayer. It was a foul physique that could repel all mysteries other than those that could affect gods. Unless he could control a god, the mind control used on Satya was ineffective on Noah. Even if the mind domination couldn't nullify the curse resistance of the god slayer, Noah still had the three great constitutions. One of the three great constitutions allowed Noah to be immune to any negative effects. The effects on the mind were also in the same category. To be honest, I'm not afraid of the mind domination of a world item, nor am I afraid that the Syrian theocracy will come out of nowhere. I asked you to make so many arrangements because I'm worried that the Syrian theocracy might still be secretly controlling Zatia and have to be cut off. Another reason is that I don't want to be disturbed. Noah was silent for a while, then he finally said what was on his mind. In addition, I also need some time to reflect on myself for causing Zatia's mind domination. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had to wait until now to deal with Zatia. The NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nassarik fell silent. In fact, everyone present knew that Noah didn't make so many arrangements just for the reasons he said. There was another, most important reason, which was for his subordinates. The mind domination that could work on Zatia would definitely work on the other NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nassarik. In order to prevent the others from falling into the same mind domination, Noah had to make so many arrangements to avoid being schemed against by the Syrian theocracy. As for Noah himself, he wasn't afraid of the mind domination or the Syrian theocracy's ambush. If it weren't for the other NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nassarik, he could have just crushed them and dealt with Zatia's matter. After all, even if Noah did not use the Demon Slayer and the Gate of Babylon, he would still be able to reach the maximum level of 100. There was no need for him to worry so much. In other words, it was Nassarik who was holding Noah back. After understanding this, the NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nassarik were filled with dark emotions. Not only was he of no use, but he was also a hindrance to the person he was willing to give everything to. He was resentful of himself. Heartwarming couldn't help but say this because of this feeling. Lord Noah, please leave the matter of suppressing Zatia to us. No, leave it to me alone. If I show signs of mind domination, I'll kill myself. The eyes of the other NPCs lit up. It was obvious that Heartwarming's suggestion had tempted the others. As for death, it wasn't scary at all for these NPCs. What the NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nassarik were really afraid of was not being able to serve Noah and disappointing Noah. Understanding this, Noah couldn't say anything to reprimand him. However, that didn't mean that Noah would agree. Zatia was under mind domination because of my orders. Noah looked at everyone present. I want to deal with this matter personally. His unquestionable tone made the NPCs unable to refute. Only then did Noah turn his head and look in a certain direction. Zatia was there. Chapter 12:27. Whoosh! A cold breeze blew across the vast plain, causing the clouds in the sky to move with the wind and cover the sun. The ground that was originally illuminated by the sun began to be covered with a layer of shadow. Under such circumstances, the noble princess like Satya was still like a marionette. Her body was hanging down as if she was suspended by an invisible string, without any vitality. At a certain moment, a figure flew over like a meteor and landed on the ground not far from Satya. Looking up at Satya, who was hanging there like a marionette, Noah's emotions fluctuated slightly. The guilt he felt towards Satya had been suppressed deep in his heart. If this guilt were to appear before Satya was restored to her original state, it would not be beneficial for the upcoming battle. Therefore, Noah's current emotions were purely a lament for a beautiful thing turning into a lifeless object. It had to be said that in terms of appearance, although Satya looked very young and was far from being as mature as Heartwarming, she had an unparalleled charm. Such a beautiful girl had now become a lifeless marionette. Anyone would feel that it was a pity. Noah's emotions were more intense than pure pity. After all, the other party was someone Noah knew. She was someone who was still alive and kicking. Of course, Noah understood. As long as he got close to her or launched an attack, that lifeless doll-like girl would instantly turn into a terrifying beast that surpassed any magical creature in this world. Speaking of which, Satya seems to have always wanted me to whip her. Noah bitterly smiled, and then the bitter smile on his face turned into his usual calmness. Although it's not what I want, Satya, I'll satisfy you today. The moment he said that, Noah's pitch-black eyes suddenly turned into a cold silver-white color. An invisible magic power fluctuated. Following the gaze of the pair of ice-cold silver eyes, it was projected onto Satya, whose upper body was hanging down like a marionette. Pa-gee. Pa-gee, pa-gee, accompanied by the sound of ice freezing, Satya's petite body gradually turned into the color of steel and was covered by cold steel. Noah's cold refinement had the ability to change the strength of the effect depending on the enemy's strength and level. If it was a small character like Igvaki who had not even reached level 20, it would take less than 3 seconds to turn him into steel. However, as a level 100 existence, Satya could not compare to Igvaki at all. Therefore, when Noah's cold smelting took effect on Satya's body, even after 3 seconds, it could only temper Satya's ankles. In that instant, a dense evil aura, murderous aura, and bloody aura surged out from Satya's body as she hung there like a marionette. Then, Noah saw it. Satya, whose upper body was hanging down like a marionette without a trace of vitality, suddenly raised her head. Her pair of empty scarlet eyes quickly emitted a red light, and her coquettish little mouth cracked open as she suddenly burst into laughter. Ha 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 ha. Amidst the pleasant laughter that sounded like silver bells, a pair of bat-like wings suddenly spread out from Satya's back and flapped abruptly. Boom! The charred ground where Satya was standing suddenly exploded. Just like that, the true ancestor of the vampires shot out like an arrow off the line. Riding the wind, she flapped her wings and shot toward Noah with an excited and ferocious smile on her beautiful face. In her hand, a ray of light suddenly bloomed and transformed into a strangely shaped spear that reminded one of the huge pipettes used in chemistry class. It was the only artifact that Satya possessed, the pipette. It was an artifact that could absorb damage to the opponent and use it to recover physical strength and injuries. Ha 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 ha. Amidst a burst of delightful laughter, Zaisha arrived in front of Noah. Under Noah's calm gaze, a bloodthirsty expression appeared on her pretty face as she fiercely stabbed the pike in her hand at Noah. Bang! It was just a simple stab, but a violent shockwave spread out with the pike in Zaisha's hand as the center, setting off a shocking sandstorm that enveloped Noah's entire body. Ahahaha. On the other hand, Zaisha seemed to have completely fallen into a frenzy. While letting out delightful laughter, she repeatedly thrusted the pike in her hand into the thick sand and wind that was stirred up by the shockwave. Immediately, a series of muffled explosive sounds reverberated within the dense sand and dust, causing the atmosphere to wail. The ground also trembled, rolling up a terrifying tornado-like air wave. That scene, in the eyes of the third party, was simply violent to the extreme. However, Zaisha did not show any signs of stopping. She continued to let out delightful laughter as she repeatedly stabbed the pike in her hand, setting off waves of sandstorm that swept in all directions. Lord Noah. In the great underground tomb of Nasarick, a group of NPCs who had returned to the stronghold and used intelligence magic to monitor the battle stood up from their seats one after another. Among them, Yair-Bel's delicate body even swayed due to her overly violent movements. She looked like she would faint at any moment. At this moment, a projection-like screen appeared in front of the NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nasarick. On the screen, Zaisha laughed maniacally as she repeatedly stabbed the pike in her hand, setting off waves of shocking sandstorm that caused the ground to tremble. The violent scene was presented before everyone's eyes. Sure enough, we shouldn't have let Lord Noah fight alone. Demiurgos no longer had his usual calmness. Instead, there was only endless anxiety on his face. We have to provide support as soon as possible. Wait, Demiurgos. Yaerbel's pretty face also had a wavering expression, but she was not as anxious as Demiurgos. She stopped Demiurgos, who was about to leave. That lord won't be in trouble because of an attack of this level. Calm down. But Demiurgos still could not hide the anxiety on his face. Instead, it was Cocytus who stared at the scene on the screen and suddenly spoke. Lord Noah isn't injured at all, right? Hearing this, everyone, including Yaerbel and Demiurgos, looked at Cocytus. Look carefully, said Cocytus, with an accent that seemed to be superimposed on each other. Although Zacia's attack frequency is very high, the Pike's ability has not been used even once. After Cocytus said this, the other NPCs also noticed this. If Zacia had dealt actual damage to Noah, it was impossible that the pipette pike, that could absorb the damage dealt to the opponent and recover the wielder's stamina and injuries, had not been activated. Even the NPCs in the distant Nasaric underground graveyard noticed this, so it was impossible for Zacia not to have noticed it. Bang! In the midst of the explosion, Zacia once again stabbed with her pike, causing the sandstorm and violent shockwaves to shake in all directions like an avalanche. This caused the ground to crack inch by inch, spreading cracks everywhere. However, Zacia's maniacal laughter had already stopped, and the battle-thirsty smile on her face gradually disappeared. Her scarlet eyes stared at the thick sandstorm close at hand, and her grip on her pike tightened. After a long while, the sand and dust in the air began to settle down, allowing a figure to slowly emerge. Only then did Zacia notice it. The tip of her pike was piercing a crimson gauntlet. Boost! A voice sounded from the crimson gauntlet. Chapter 12:28. Boost! When such a voice sounded from the crimson gauntlet, a warning sign rose in Satya's heart. At Satya's level, intuition, which was similar to a sixth sense, was more trustworthy than what she saw with her eyes. Therefore, the moment an inexplicable warning rose in her heart, Satya did not think twice and directly raised the pike in her hand to block in front of her. The next moment, a bright vortex of air emerged from the fist wrapped in the crimson gauntlet. At the same time, the arm covered by the crimson gauntlet suddenly clenched into a fist and punched heavily at Satya in front of her. Wherever the fist passed, a sonic boom sounded in the space. The momentum was extremely terrifying. Such a punch directly cut through the space and fiercely landed on the pike that Satya had raised in time to block in front of her. Boom! A loud muffled sound that caused people's eardrums to sting and their heads to go blank resounded in the sky above the plains. The astonishing impact turned into a substantial force that surged on the ground like a tide. At the center of the astonishing force, Satya only felt an extremely terrifying force feedback from the pike in her hand, causing her hand holding the pike to go numb. She was sent flying by the unparalleled force. Go! Satya inevitably let out a soft groan. It took her a lot of effort to adjust her body in the air and land on the ground. Even so, the tremendous force acting on Satya's body still caused the vampire's feet to rub against the ground, plowing 2 gullies in the ground. When she came to a stop, the soles of her feet in the gullies emitted a sizzling sound, and light smoke rose from them. Satya's steel-like feet helped her instead, preventing her from feeling the pain caused by the violent friction. But even so, Satya still raised her head with a solemn expression and looked ahead. There, the thick sand and dust that filled the space had been blown away by the impact of the shocking punch just now. Then, Noah's figure appeared in front of Satya without any injuries, just like before. His expression was calm from beginning to end. However, in the hands of the calm Noah, there was a crimson gauntlet that could not be ignored no matter what. It was a gauntlet that looked like a ferocious dragon claw. There was also a jade inlaid on the back of the gauntlet. Boost! The voice came from the Baoyu. As the voice sounded, Satya was also keenly aware of it. The aura on Noah's body suddenly doubled in strength. There was no doubt that it was the power brought by the gauntlet. Upon understanding this, Satya wasn't alarmed. Instead, she laughed. Just like before, she let out a melodious laughter that sounded like silver bells. As expected of Sir Noah, the supreme ruler of the underground tomb of Nasaric. Sure enough, an attack of that level couldn't do anything to you. Satya. Noah stared at the laughing Satya and narrowed his eyes slightly. I see. Although your mind is controlled, you haven't lost your rationality. What are you talking about? Sir Noah. Satya was like a noble princess. She held the spear in one hand and pressed the other to her chest as she spoke with her head raised and chest out. My condition is unprecedentedly good. It's so good that I can't help but want to suck all the blood from Sir Noah's body. After saying that, Satya stuck out her little pink tongue and licked her lips. She looked at Noah with a fervent gaze. If I can taste the blood of a supreme being, there's nothing more blissful than that. Is that so? Noah said indifferently. Then, if I say that I don't mind letting you have a taste, will you obediently listen to me and stand there without moving? Although it's a very charming proposal, that won't do. Satya revealed a bloodthirsty smile. Since Sir Noah attacked me, then no matter what, I have to do my best to kill you. Why? Noah asked in return. Why do you have to do your best to kill me when I attack you? Am I not the master you should be loyal to even if you have to give up your life? Why? The smile on Satya's face froze slightly, and she frowned as though she was confused by her own thoughts. That's right. Why would I fight Sir Noah? Shouldn't Sir Noah be the master I should be loyal to even if I have to give up my life? Why would I do something so disrespectful? After being confused for a while, Satya suddenly smiled. Although I don't know why, since it's already started, there's no reason not to continue, right? You're right, Noah said self-deprecatingly. Since it's already started, there's no reason not to continue. Ahahaha. Satya laughed joyfully. That's right. That's it. The instant she said that, a shocking bloody light suddenly erupted from Satya's body. Within the bloody light, Satya's figure slowly changed. No. It should be said that Satya's clothes slowly changed. The original red and black princess dress suddenly disappeared. It was replaced by a set of armor. It was a set of dark red full-body armor that seemed to be dyed in blood and gave off a bone-chilling feeling. The full-body armor tightly wrapped around Satya's body without any gaps. There was only a hole on her face, exposing her face to the air. It looked like a helmet. The helmet was like a swan's head, with bird-like feathers protruding from the left and right sides. There were also winged ornaments hanging from the chest to the shoulders. The lower half of the body was a bright red battle skirt. It wasn't just a piece of equipment, but a set of defensive equipment made up of many pieces of equipment. Moreover, every piece of that set of defensive equipment was at the legendary grade. When combined, they could display power close to the divine artifact level. Now that she was fully geared in legendary equipment, she looked like a bona fide Valkyrie. Her originally noble image had transformed into an extremely dignified one. Those who knew Satya would definitely understand. With this set of defensive equipment, the Guardian with the strongest one-on-one combat ability in Nazaric's underground tomb would truly display her strength. There was no other reason. The structure of Satya's professions was almost all about strengthening combat ability. Among these professions, there was a profession that specialized in combat ability, Valkyrie. Satya, who had entered a complete combat state, was now about to display the power of this profession. In that case, the preparations are complete. Opening her eyes, Satya held the pike tightly and grinned at Noah. Then, I'm going. With that, Satya stomped her feet on the ground, and her figure almost turned into a black line as she charged at Noah. Looking at the scene of Satya rushing at him with a bloodthirsty smile, Noah slowly clenched the red gauntlet covering his arm. The next moment, the pike that Satya had thrust out carried a fierce wind and an ear-piercing sound as it stabbed at Noah's head. Just like before, Satya had no intention of showing mercy at all. Thus, Noah clenched his fist tightly, allowing the vigorous power to condense on the gauntlet. Boost! The familiar voice sounded again. Noah's aura suddenly doubled. Immediately, Noah took a step forward. His ferocious gauntlets carried a vigorous force as they heavily smashed towards the long spear that was thrusting towards him. Clang! The collision between the spear and the gauntlet gave rise to a crisp sound of metal clashing. The sharp tip of the spear collided with the ferocious fist, causing an extremely violent ripple of energy to burst out from the point of collision between the sharp tip of the spear and the ferocious gauntlet. Gotcha! Suddenly, a crack appeared on the ground beneath Noah and Satya's feet. Chapter 12:29. Without using the Demon Slayer and the Gate of Babylon, Noah could match the level 100 Zaisha with his own strength alone. However, that was under the condition that Zaisha did not use any equipment. Now, Zaisha had equipped the Dropper Pike, a divine artifact, and was even wearing legendary equipment. Some of the equipment from Yggdrasil were magical equipment that could display unusual effects and functions, while others did not have such effects. Zaisha's Dropper Pike belonged to the former, while the crimson armor on her body belonged to the latter. However, the equipment from the game had a very common characteristic. That was, it could increase the attributes of the equipment user. In view of this, the strength of the fully armed Zaisha suddenly soared. Clang! Amidst the bell-like sound of metal colliding, the impact of the violent collision not only caused a crack to burst open on the ground, but it also forced both Noah and Zaisha back. However, Zaisha was forced back several steps. On the other hand, Noah only took half a step back before stabilizing his body. Although Zaisha's strength had soared after being fully armed, Noah's strength had also soared by several times under the effect of the boosted gear. In the end, Noah still had the upper hand. It's not over yet. Zaisha suddenly stepped forward while retreating, and her body once again shot out like a sharp arrow. She swung the huge pike in her hand, and with a burst of extremely oppressive wind, she repeatedly stabbed at Noah's body. His field of vision was covered by dazzling spear shadows. Noah's eyes hardened as he withdrew his feet. While he was still retreating in midair, his arm, which was covered by the ferocious crimson hand armor, was waved and violently deflected the many spear shadows that were thrusting towards him. Clang 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 clang. On the vast plain, the crisp sound of metal clashing echoed in the air, lingering for a long time. What's wrong with you, Lord Noah? Why aren't you fighting back? Ahahaha. Shadya, who was in a position where she was constantly attacking, repeatedly thrust the Dropper Pike in her hand in a violent manner while staring at Noah, who had a calm expression on his face as he deflected the incoming attacks one by one. She laughed provocatively. What about the overwhelming power you displayed when you faced all of us guardians alone in the throne room? Could it all be fake? Noah ignored Satya's provocation and only flicked away the spear that was thrusting at him. His expression didn't even change. Looking at the calm Noah, Satya became impatient. If that's the case, then let me kill you. After saying that, Zaisha suddenly stopped and extended her hand towards Noah. Whing! Amidst the trembling of space, 3 ring-shaped magic arrays suddenly overlapped and revolved in front of Satya's palm. Magic Enhancement Crimson Nova. A circle of crimson flames rose from the center of the magic array. The crimson flames began to expand like ripples. Then, in the space around Noah, who was retreating, the same flames suddenly appeared. It instantly enveloped Noah's entire body and exploded. Bang! Amidst the explosion, Noah's entire body was engulfed in raging flames, and he was roasted by the scorching flames. However, Xiaotaya's eyes suddenly widened. There was no other reason. It was because in the flames whose temperature was comparable to the magma of an erupting volcano, Noah seemed to be unaffected. His body carried traces of heat from the flames as he slowly raised his foot and stomped down. With a bang, Noah's figure shot out of the scorching flames and approached Xiaotaya in a breath. Xiaotaya's expression changed and her pupils shrank. She didn't have time to consider why her magic was ineffective against Noah. She hurriedly raised the pipette pike and fiercely swung it at the figure shooting over. Noah, who had turned into a lightning-like black shadow, seemed to have sensed the ferocious energy coming toward him. His body instantly moved horizontally, and with a spin, he appeared behind Xiaotaya as if he was performing an elegant dance. In the next second, Noah's body spun slightly, and he clenched his fists that were covered in crimson gloves. The powerful force caused a gust of wind to swirl around, and as Noah's fist swung out, it formed a sonic boom that blasted toward Zacia's back. Sensing the terrifying energy coming from behind, Xiaotaya's expression changed again and again as she screamed. Impure Impact Shield. Blood-like crimson energy ripples suddenly spread out from Xiaotaya's body and turned into a barrier that protected Xiaotaya inside. Bang! With a muffled boom, Noah's terrifying punch smashed into the energy barrier. The resulting shockwave turned into waves of wind that spread out in all directions. Immediately after, a cracking sound rang out from the energy barrier. It was the sound of the energy barrier protecting Xiaotaya inside cracking. What? Xiaotaya was shocked. My impure impact shield actually cracked. On the other side, Noah's brows furrowed slightly. It didn't shatter. Muttering those words, Noah's figure once again spun around. Relying on his LV-4 and SSS rank, agility, and dexterity, he was like a phantom that constantly flashed around Xiaotaya's body. While he was dodging, Noah's fists, which contained a terrifying strength chi, continuously blasted out, one after another, hitting the impure impact shield that protected Xiaotaya. Under Noah's almost non-stop attack, a series of muffled bang-bang-bang sounds continuously shook the energy barrier around Xiaotaya without any interruption. Every time a muffled sound shook, the energy barrier around Xiaotaya would crack with a crack sound. Under such circumstances, Xiaotaya really didn't dare to believe it. If she was directly hit by such a punch, even if she was wearing legendary-grade equipment, she would definitely be injured. After all, Xiaotaya's impure impact shield was not a magic spell, but a special skill. This special skill could be used for both defense and attack. When used for defense, its defensive power was enough to surpass level 10 magic. When used for attack, its offensive power was enough to surpass Xiaotaya's pipette pike. Such a powerful special skill could only be used twice a day by Xiaotaya. Such a barrier actually cracked under Noah's punch. One could imagine how terrifying Noah's punch was. It must be the power of the Crimson Gauntlet. Otherwise, even Lord Noah wouldn't be able to crack the impure impact shield with an ordinary attack. Could it be a world-class item? Xiaotaya's guess was only half correct. Noah's ordinary punch could have such power because of the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear, which increased his strength 3 times. With LV-4 and an SSS level blessing in all aspects, Noah's physical ability had been multiplied 3 times. One could imagine how terrifying it was. However, Noah's Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear was not a world-class item, but a weapon imitated by weapon refinement. Boost. Suddenly, Noah's gauntlet made a sound again. The fourth multiplier ability was activated. Noah stomped on the ground and charged straight at Zaisha. His body spun, and he leaped into the air. Only then did Noah's aura suddenly soar by twofold. Immediately after, under Xiataya's narrowed pupils, the fist covered by the crimson gauntlet carried an incomparably fierce force, creating a sharp sonic boom as it smashed down on the energy barrier. Bang! A muffled sound that was louder than any of the previous sounds resounded in the sky. Chapter 1230. Bang! Amidst the deafening explosion, a violent shockwave erupted from the cracked energy barrier around Satya. The shockwave swept away the dust on the ground, breaking it inch by inch. Bang! Without any suspense, Noah's punch, which had been amplified 4 times by the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear, caused the blood-like energy barrier to shatter like glass. It shattered into pieces and scattered in all directions. Then, Noah's body turned, and his legs suddenly flew out, landing heavily on Zaisha's body. Dong! The terrifying power sent Satya flying like a rubber ball. She rubbed against the air and heavily slammed into the ground in the distance. She smashed through the rock layer and stirred up a dense cloud of dust. The ground looked like it had been hit by a meteorite, and a crater appeared. Poochie! In the crater, Satya spat out a mouthful of blood. The crimson full-body armor on her body cracked open. Everyone suddenly fell silent. In front, Noah raised his eyes and looked at Satya, who was deep in the crater. He watched as blood seeped out of the corners of her mouth. His eyes flickered slightly as he sighed. Give up, Satya. You're no match for me. Although Noah's words did not contain much confidence, it was precisely because they did not contain any emotion that they gave off the most realistic feeling. Cough, cough, cough. Satya covered her chest and coughed as she slowly stood up from the crater with difficulty. She looked at Noah and revealed a coquettish smile. That's true. You're indeed worthy of being the supreme and invincible sovereign that I'm willing to sacrifice my life for. You're the supreme ruler of the underground tomb of Nasarick. With such power, you're the absolute overlord of this world. Provoking you is more foolish than provoking a dragon. While saying that, Satya did not have any intention of giving up. Instead, the bloodthirst on her face became even stronger. Undoubtedly, I know this clearly. Why do I feel that I can't give up the battle with you? Why do I feel that I have to kill you? I really don't understand. Is that so? Noah closed his eyes. In other words, you don't intend to surrender. Of course. Satya pointed the pike in her hand at Noah and laughed coquettishly. I've been looking forward to Sir Noah being able to love me. I finally got this opportunity, so how can I give it up? Hearing that, Noah was silent for a while. After a while, he opened his eyes and looked at Satya with determination. If that's the case, then let me pull down the curtain of this boring battle. After saying that, Noah raised the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear. Boost, multiplication. The voice that represented the activation of the 5th, multiplication ability, echoed from the jade of the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear. The limit of the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear, which was created by Noah's weapon refinement, was 5 boosts. Therefore, from the beginning of the battle until now, 50 seconds had passed, and the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear was finally able to display its greatest power. The reason why Noah had not used the Demon Slayer and the Gate of Babylon was because he was waiting for this moment. Thus, Noah chanted a contract in the Elven language. Cold Queen of Steel, the holy sword that slays demons. Noah pulled out the silver dagger from his back and placed it in his right hand equipped with the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear. Turn into a sword of steel and bestow me with divine power. A dazzling white light burst out from the silver dagger. Amidst the light, the highest-grade elven equipment named Demon Slayer appeared in its complete form. It turned into a shining silver holy sword and was held tightly by a ferocious red dragon-shaped gauntlet. That's... Zacia's pupils shrank. Aster. Zacia was not familiar with the elven girl named Aster, but she was not a stranger either. She was not familiar with Aster because ever since she flew out of Noah's bed in the form of a sword and fought with the Guardians, Zacia had never seen Aster again. She was not unfamiliar because of jealousy. She was jealous that Aster could become Noah's weapon. Not only Zacia, but even Yerbid was extremely jealous of Aster. For Yerbid and Zacia, who had special feelings for Noah, just the title of becoming Noah's weapon was enough to arouse their jealousy. Not to mention, because Aster was a weapon, she was carried by Noah at all times. They even slept together, which made Yerbid and Zacia jealous for a while. If they could be like Aster and transform into a weapon and be used by Lord Noah, it would be too fortunate. This was the truest thought of Yerbid and Zacia after knowing of Aster's existence. Therefore, although Zacia had only seen Aster once, she had never forgotten the existence of this elven girl. Of course, there was another reason why she had such a deep impression. That was, back then, Aster had fought with all the Guardians in the form of a sword and was not at a disadvantage. At that time, all the Guardians were not wearing any equipment, and because the battlefield was in Noah's room, they did not even use their true strength. However, being able to fight against 6 Guardians was enough to prove Aster's strength. She was definitely not weaker than a world-class weapon. This fact made Zacia extremely vigilant. Unfortunately, Noah had been holding back and not using the Demon Slayer, not only because he wanted to let it display the power of a world-class weapon. Transfer. Following this voice, the power of the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear, which had been multiplied 5 times, was all transferred to the Demon Slayer. Immediately, the holy sword that had annihilated the Demon King trembled and released an astonishing light. That light illuminated the entire world. At this moment, the power of the strongest sword elven had multiplied 5 times, increasing to an unprecedented level. With this level of power, even the mind control of a world-class item can be removed in an instant. As soon as his voice fell, Noah, who was holding the Demon Slayer that was emitting an unprecedentedly strong light, leaned forward, shook, and turned into a black shadow that shot towards Zacia. That speed was simply like a bolt of lightning. The terrifying speed shocked Zacia again and again, and she could not hide her shock as she shouted. Impure Impact Shield. A blood-red energy barrier shook out from Zacia's body and covered her. Absolute Sword Skill Initial Form Purple Lightning. The lightning-like thrust landed on the energy barrier. Bang! It couldn't even hold on for a second before the energy barrier suddenly exploded. Wah! Zacia turned pale with fright. She hurriedly flapped the bat-like wings on her back and retreated. However, at this moment, golden ripples suddenly fluctuated in the space around Zacia, and chains shot out. They stretched out and wrapped around Zacia's limbs, forcibly restraining her body. This time, Zacia did not even have time to react. Poochie! The white-eyed holy sword that was shining with an unprecedentedly strong and dazzling light pierced through Zacia's chest. Rich white light enveloped Zacia's body. Ah! Zacia's sorrowful cry resounded through the sky. Chapter 1231. Ah! Shadia, who was clad in a crimson armor, was enveloped by the dazzling white radiance of the Demon Slayer. She wailed in agony as though she had been struck by lightning. She looked as though she had also been purified by the Demon Slayer. Wisps of black aura emanated from her body. Noah, who was holding the Demon Slayer tightly, maintained the posture of piercing through Satya's chest with the elven device in his hand. He looked up at Satya, who was crying out in pain in the white light as though she had been struck by lightning. He gritted his teeth, and the divine power in his body intensified as he poured it into the silver holy sword in his hand. Clang! After the Demon Slayer was strengthened by the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear 5 times in a row, in addition to the massive amount of divine power, the white radiance emanating from it was so dazzling that it burned one's eyes. Under this situation, Shadia, who was enveloped by the dazzling white radiance of the Demon Slayer, as though she had been struck by lightning, released wisps of black aura from her body, and her wails became even more intense. From a distance, it was as though a white sun had appeared on the vast plain, dazzling and resplendent. The dazzling white radiance gushed out like a tide and enveloped the entire space. At that moment, the monsters that were lying in ambush in the plain and sealed off Shadia's surroundings in accordance with Noah's orders were drowned by the dazzling white radiance. These demonic creatures also involuntarily appeared from the darkness and let out beast-like cries. There was nothing they could do about it. After all, the Demon Slayer had a curse resistance that could break all curses. It was simply the natural enemy of these monsters who had negative energy that was completely opposite to their life force. Even Demon King Solomon, who had inherited the power of the Dark Elf King and was devoured by the power of the Dark Elf King, couldn't resist the power of the Demon Slayer, let alone these monsters. What's more, the power of the Demon Slayer had increased 5-fold from the beginning to the end. Fortunately, at that moment, the power of the Demon Slayer wasn't directed at these monsters in the underground tomb of Nazarick. Otherwise, all the monsters here, including the few level 85 monsters, would have been cleansed by the power of the Demon Slayer, leaving nothing behind. As a result, amidst all kinds of bestial roars, the dazzling white radiance that enveloped the entire space finally stopped expanding. After an unknown amount of time, the white radiance that enveloped the entire vast plain gradually dimmed. Immediately, the monsters whose negative energy was surging due to the power of the Demon Slayer, looked at the center of the dim white radiance with lingering fear. There, Noah, who was holding the Demon Slayer, was still in the posture of piercing the silver holy sword into Satya's body. His head was lowered, and the bangs on his forehead covered his expression. On the other hand, Zaisha also lowered her head and returned to her marionette-like state. With a trembling sound, the huge thorny spear in Satya's hand and the crimson full-body armor on her body seemed to have turned into a mirage and disappeared in a flash. Bang! On Noah's right hand that was holding the Demon Slayer, the Longinus, which was called the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear, also shattered into pieces like glass and disappeared with a shattering sound. Ugh! Satya let out a muffled groan. Her delicate body softened, and she slowly fell down. It was not until this moment that Noah finally made a move. After pulling the Demon Slayer out of Satya's body, Noah hugged Satya, who had collapsed on him, and knelt on one knee on the ground. Everyone suddenly fell silent. Ugh! After an unknown period of time, Satya let out a groan and slowly opened her scarlet eyes. Noah, who was holding Satya in his arms, immediately looked into her eyes. At this moment, there was no longer the emptiness in her eyes, nor was there the madness from before. There was only endless exhaustion. Awe! Satya also opened her eyes and met Noah's gaze. She was stunned on the spot. Sir! Noah! Upon hearing the familiar voice, Noah secretly heaved a sigh of relief and asked, "What's the matter? How do you feel?" "How do I feel?" Satya seemed to be a little confused for a moment, and she seemed to be unable to grasp the situation. She just opened her tired eyes and spoke weakly. "I feel so tired. For an Undying, this was absolutely an incredible thing. Because the Undying didn't feel fatigue and didn't need to eat or drink. As the true ancestor of vampires, who was at the top of the Undying, it was really inconceivable that Satya would feel tired. Of course, if it was mental fatigue, it would be a different story. However, looking at Satya's powerless appearance, it was clear that this vampire girl wasn't just mentally exhausted. She was definitely physically exhausted as well. However, this was not strange at all. As an undying, Satya's body was also full of negative energy, which was the opposite of life force. Under the direct attack of the Demon Slayer, the negative energy in Satya's body was purified to the extreme, which caused Satya to feel extremely tired like ordinary people. However, Satya's mental control was also lifted. Therefore, Satya looked at Noah blankly. Why am I here? Why is Sir Noah here? You don't need to think about anything. Have a good rest first. Noah stroked Satya's silver-gray hair. When you wake up, you'll understand everything. If it were in the past, as the guardian of Nazarik's underground tomb, Zaisha wouldn't have fallen asleep in front of the person she had given everything she had to serve. However, the accumulated fatigue in Satya's body seemed to be quite strong, so the vampire girl nodded weakly, closed her beautiful eyes, and slowly fell asleep. Looking at Satya, who had fallen asleep in his arms, Noah carried her in a princess carry. Let's go back, Satya. The noble little princess-like girl did not respond to Noah's words. She just laid in Noah's arms with a serene expression. In the underground tomb of Nasarik, a group of NPCs looked at the screen in the air and fell silent as they watched Noah carrying Satya in his arms. Demiurgo sighed and said so. Sir Noah's overwhelming victory. That's right. Yule was also in a daze. Even Satya, who is the strongest in one-on-one combat among the Guardians, was not a match for Sir Noah even when she was fully armed. 50 seconds. Cosita spat out white gas. Sir Noah defeated Satya in such a short amount of time. Really? Marley was a little depressed. Too strong, the group of NPCs fell silent. Then, Sebastian said, that's right. Does such a powerful supreme really need the loyalty of lowly people like us? This was the reason why the NPCs fell silent. I hope everyone will remember today's lesson. Yerbade looked at Noah on the screen and said in an unprecedentedly serious tone. Next time, I won't allow you to be as useless as you were this time. The group of NPCs nodded resolutely. Chapter 1232. As mentioned earlier, the underground tomb of Nasarik was mainly divided into 10 floors, and all of them were located underground. On the ground, the underground tomb of Nasarik was an extremely vast graveyard. The graveyard was surrounded by a huge wall that was 6 meters thick. The wall was circular. There was an entrance at the front and back of the wall. Inside the wall, the huge graveyard seemed to have sunk into the earth, and it looked like a basin. In the graveyard, in addition to neatly trimmed weeds and many messy tombstones, there were also dense trees. The scene that seemed to form a forest complemented the surrounding neatly trimmed weeds and messy tombstones, creating a strong sense of contrast. Not only that, but there were also exquisite carvings of angels and goddesses everywhere in the graveyard. The carvings of angels and goddesses were extremely exquisite and breathtaking. Moreover, it could be seen at a glance that someone was carrying out regular maintenance. In contrast, the towering trees in the graveyard were crooked and drooped, brewing a gloomy atmosphere. Then, in the graveyard, there was an ancestral hall in each of the 4 corners of the graveyard. Surrounded by the 4 ancestral halls, there was an extremely large ancestral hall in the center of the graveyard. This large ancestral hall was the entrance to the underground tomb of Nasarik. Noah, who was carrying Satya, slowly descended from the air with the help of a magic tool with the power of flight, and landed in this strange graveyard. Whoosh! Almost immediately, monsters of different shapes and sizes flashed out from the shadows around the graveyard, their bodies surging with an evil aura. These monsters were at least level 50 and above. Therefore, once an outsider stepped into the graveyard, these monsters of at least level 50 and above would instantly appear and take down any outsider. However, when they saw the full appearance of the newcomer, the demonic creatures that were surging with evil aura all paused for a moment. Then, they knelt or prostrated themselves in unison, offering Noah their vassal. Noah ignored the monsters around him. He only carried the sleeping Satya and walked towards the central ancestral hall. When Noah walked out of sight, the monsters of at least level 50 and above seemed to have merged into the surrounding shadows and disappeared, continuing to guard the entrance to the underground tomb of Nasarek. Not long after, Noah, who was carrying Satya, stepped onto the steps of the ancestral hall. Lord Noah. At the entrance of the ancestral hall, Yacht, Mare, Cosette, Demiurgos, Sebastian, and a group of combat maids were all present. They bowed in the direction of Noah. Welcome back. Noah nodded casually and then looked at Beta. Although judging from the situation, Siataya should be fine, let me confirm it for the time being. Yes, Lord Noah, Yacht reported as he stepped forward and lowered his head. I have just confirmed the list of NPCs in the throne room's management system. Satya's name has indeed returned to its original white color. It is no longer red-black, which was hostile when she was in the state of mind. Based on this, Satya's problem should be resolved. That's good. Noah's expression softened slightly. That is true, but it is also true that Satya was hostile to the Supreme One. Bade looked at Noah, and his eyes, which were glowing with golden light, flickered slightly. Lord Noah, shouldn't we punish Satya? Noah furrowed his brows when he heard Bade's words. He raised his head and looked at the NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nasarek. Only then did Noah notice that these NPCs who were loyal to him seemed to have changed. The change here wasn't in their appearance, but in their atmosphere. In the past, when these NPCs faced Noah, they would have an atmosphere of respect and worship. Now, not only did the reverence and worship become even more intense, there was also a trace of a different feeling mixed in. It was a feeling that came after they gained tenacious determination and strong willpower. It seemed that during the battle between Noah and Satya, these NPCs in the underground tomb of Nasarek had gained some benefits. Please forgive me for interfering with Lord Noah's decision. Under Noah's gaze, Yacht said so. For a force, the distinction between reward and punishment is the most important issue. It is also common sense in the world. Even if Satya was disrespectful to Lord Noah involuntarily, a mistake is a mistake. If there is no punishment, the subordinates won't take it as a warning. Who knows, when the same thing happens again, the others will use this as an excuse to weaken their willpower. The success rate of mind domination was also related to the strength of an individual's willpower. If one's willpower was strong, then even if they were under mind domination, they would be able to resist it. Take Satya for example. Even when her mind was under control, she could still rely on her tenacious willpower to resist and counterattack the caster. This resulted in the enemy being unable to give orders to Satya and could only make the helpless decision of abandoning her. Knowing that they will be punished for making such a mistake, even if they are under mind domination, in order to not be punished, everyone will resist so that the situation won't become too unfavorable, Demiurgos continued Yacht's words. As such, this subordinate also believes that Lord Noah should give Satya an appropriate punishment as a warning. It's not just this incident, Sebas said in a deep voice. In the future, no matter what happens that will implicate the Supreme Sovereign, we hope that Lord Noah can give us the harshest punishment. Immediately, Yacht, Mare, Cositas, and the other NPCs in the underground tomb of Nasarek all nodded. Hearing this, Noah finally understood. Yacht and the others suggested that Noah punish Satya not only because of the so-called fair rewards and punishments, but also because they wanted to express their determination. They were determined not to cause trouble for Noah and drag him down. Moreover, if I am under mind domination and betray Lord Noah, then even if Lord Noah forgives me, I won't forgive myself. Yacht revealed a sincere and gentle smile. I'm sure Satya will feel the same way, right? If it is someone who is loyal to Lord Noah, then under such circumstances, there is no one who would not feel guilty, Demiurgos said. This subordinate believes that if Lord Noah punishes Satya, then the guilt in her heart will disappear. On the contrary, if Lord Noah doesn't punish Satya, then the guilt in her heart will definitely haunt her, right? This was indeed true. After all, punishment also meant forgiveness. No matter what mistakes one made, after being punished, it was as good as written off. In this place, even if it was for Satya's sake, Chen Zhao had to follow Yacht and the other suggestions. Even though he knew this, Noah's frown deepened. The reason was simple. Noah was partly responsible for Satya's mind domination. Punish Satya. If that was the case, what would Noah do about the guilt in his heart? Noah, who felt a headache coming on, could only sigh and look at Yacht. Let me think about it first. In any case, Satya hasn't woken up yet. When she wakes up, tell her to come find me. Understood. Yacht and the others immediately lowered their heads. Seeing this, Noah walked past Yair Bedard and the others and walked into the large underground tomb in Nassarik. The NPCs in the great underground tomb of Nassarik hurriedly followed. At this moment, Noah suddenly spoke. Demiurgos, think of a way to find out the location of the capital of the Celian cult. Yes. Demiurgos was startled at first, but he quickly responded after reacting. May I know what Lord Noah plans to do? Isn't that obvious? Noah continued to walk forward without looking back. As he walked, he spoke faintly. You came to my territory to do as you please. Out of etiquette, I should also pay you a visit. Chapter 1233. On the day that the battle between Noah and Zaisha ended, a small change was also taking place in Elantir. Recalling the huge commotion that he had heard when he sneaked into Elantir, a person wearing a black robe whose figure seemed to have blended into the moonlight slightly lifted his face that was covered by the hood of the black robe. He opened his mouth and revealed a crazy and sinister smile. Seems like that side is more interesting, these words rang out softly from under the hoodie. From the voice, it was easy to recognize that the other party was a woman. The woman in the black robe was immersed in her own world. No one knew what she thought of, but she kept laughing creepily as she walked forward. Upon closer inspection, the place where the black-robed person was actually a huge cemetery. This graveyard belonged to Elantir. Moreover, it was a huge cemetery with an outer city wall that occupied almost half of the western area of Elantir. Presumably, even compared to the other countries, the scale of this cemetery was very large, right? This was a scale that appeared to suppress the birth of the undead. The undead were a race that was born from death. Therefore, as long as there was a place where the living were dying, it was possible for the undead to be born. According to research, people had discovered that the probability of the dead who died an unnatural death or had no one to mourn was quite high. Therefore, in places like battlefields and ruins, the undead would often appear. Elantir's location bordered the borders of the kingdom, empire, and theocracy. Not to mention the theocracy for the time being, because the kingdom and empire were at war all year round, this city that bordered the borders of the two countries was extremely special. For example, the battlefield where the kingdom and empire fought was very close to Elantir. The soldiers who died on the battlefield, regardless of the number or cause of death, were enough to give birth to a large number of undead. In view of this, in order to prevent the dead from becoming undead, a cemetery that people could mourn became rather important. This was the reason why Elantilai's cemetery was built so large. Of course, even if this was the case, undying beings would often be born here. It was one of the places that no one was willing to visit. Under such circumstances, the black-robed man walked unscrupulously in the cemetery. Soon, he arrived in front of an ancestral hall and removed the hood on his head. What appeared under the hood was the pretty face of a young girl in her prime. The girl's facial features were regular, and her appearance could be considered cute. However, on that cute face hung a dangerous smile like that of a carnivorous beast. With such a smile, the girl pushed open the stone door of the ancestral hall with light steps. She entered the ancestral hall and came to the stone pedestal where the corpse was placed. The young girl walked up to the stone pedestal and pressed down on a small, inconspicuous carving at the bottom of the stone pedestal with a relaxed movement that didn't make one think that she would appear in a graveyard or an ancestral hall. Gotcha! The sculpture sank as the girl moved. Immediately afterward, the stone seat trembled and slowly opened like a door, revealing a flight of stairs leading to the underground in front of the young girl. Hee, the girl giggled as if she found it interesting. Moreover, she didn't hesitate to walk down the gloomy underground stairs that would make ordinary girls shrink back. She arrived at an extremely vast empty space. The walls and floor were made of artificially treated earth. It was unknown if there was wind, but the air was quite fresh. However, inside the empty space, there was a strange carpet hanging on the wall. Moreover, there was a candlestick that seemed to be dyed red with blood. The candles inside were lit and emitted a faint flame. The swaying candlelight made the girl's shadow stretch on the walls and floor. The girl walked with clear steps and arrived at the bottom of the empty space. Looking around, the girl's gaze stopped at a place after a while. Her giggling voice echoed in the surroundings without any concealment. Tisk! The girl's unpleasant giggling attracted a speechless sound that contained displeasure. That was the sound of someone being easily discovered. Moreover, it was the sound of someone being easily discovered by someone they hated. Under such a speechless sound, a thin man slowly walked out from the shadows where the girl was looking. It was a man with sunken eyes and no hair. It was impossible to determine his age. He wore a long robe and wore a necklace made of small animal skulls around his neck. His body was so thin that only skin and bones were left. He also held a black staff. Rather than calling him a human, it would be better to call him a skinny skeleton. Hi! The girl warmly greeted the skeleton man. I'm here to see you, little Kaji. My name is Kadget, not little Kaji. The skeleton man who called himself Kadget said with an unpleasant voice. Celian Theocracy Special Intelligence Unit, Dark Scriptures Clementine. What are you doing here? I'm no longer a member of the Dark Scripture. The girl named Clementine said with a frivolous tone. I'm here to tell you a piece of good news, little Kaji. A piece of good news that will be of great help to your goal. Hearing this, Kadget narrowed his eyes. Kadget was a magic chanter that specialized in the study of the undead. That was why Kadget stayed in this kind of place. Of course, the reason why Kadget stayed here wasn't as simple as just researching the undying. He wanted to create an undying that wouldn't tire, didn't need to eat or drink, and had an immortal life. Usually, in places where the undead gathered, there would be powerful undead. If there were powerful undead gathered, then there would be even more powerful undead. Using this characteristic, in theory, as long as there were enough undead, then in the end, there would definitely be a terrifying undead king that was strong enough to make all the races in the world despair. Kadget's goal was to turn Ylantir into a ghost town. By collecting the negative energy in the ghost town, he could create a large number of undead, and even make himself an undead existence. The girl named Clementine clearly knew Kadget's goal. That was why she said that. Did you know? Clementine giggled. It said that recently, the Adventurers Guild discovered a super powerful undying being and sent out 3 teams of secret silver-ranked adventurers as leaders. A total of more than 200 Adventurers Guild members went on a crusade against the undying being. In the end, those people ran back scared witless today, causing Ylantir to almost fall into chaos. Hearing this, Kadget's eyes flashed as he stared closely at Clementine. Is what you said true? It's true, it's true. Of course it's true. Clementine said with a tone that made people feel like she was joking. Also, it said that the super-powerful undead seems to be a servant that someone summoned with summoning magic. Oh? Kadget asked with interest. Then what rank of undead summoning magic did that person use? 3rd rank. Or 4th rank? Little Kadget, you've become stupid. The smile on Clementine's face gradually became uninteresting as she said exaggeratedly. That's a magic chanter that could force back more than 200 adventurers led by 3 teams of mithril rank adventurers. Just his servant alone made the Adventurers Guild feel like they're facing a great enemy. It even turned the leader of one of the mithril rank adventurers into a steel statue in an instant. How could it only be a 3rd or 4th rank trash? The corners of Kadget's eyes twitched slightly. There was no other reason. The highest rank of undead summoning magic that Kadget used was only a 3rd rank magic. Hey, little Kadget, don't you want to meet that person? Clementine invited as if she had good intentions. Perhaps you can obtain the secret to summoning such a powerful undead from him. It's very likely that he's like you, only able to use low-rank summoning magic, but can use precious magical tools to increase the power of his summoning magic. Perhaps that's how he can summon such a powerful undead. What she meant was for Kadget to snatch it from him. Is that so? Kadget rolled his eyes and sneered at Clementine. But, what's in it for you? Do you even need to ask? Clementine smiled cheerfully. Of course it's interesting. Chapter 1234. If someone thought that the underground tomb of Nasarick was gloomy because it was underground, then they were completely wrong. Indeed, in the great catacombs beneath Nasarick, there were dark places. After all, the underground tomb of Nasarick was made up of 10 underground spaces. Among them, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd floors of the underground tomb of Nasarick were in the form of tombs. The 4th floor was an underground lake. The 5th floor was an ice river. The 6th floor was a jungle. The 7th floor was magma. The 8th floor was a wilderness. To say that the first 8 floors of the underground tomb of Nasarick were gloomy was to underestimate the stronghold of a powerful guild that could do anything in the game. However, this was only true for the first 8 floors of the underground tomb of Nasarick. The 9th floor of the Nasarick catacombs was as solemn and sacred as a chalk castle. Every room was a standard royal suite. It couldn't be any more luxurious. Compared to the first 8 floors, it was like a place of heaven. Naturally, such a place wouldn't be gloomy. The rainbow-colored crystal lamp hanging from the ceiling emitted light that was extremely gentle and beautiful. That was the light from a magic tool called Perpetual Light. Just like the name of the magic item, as long as there was enough magic, this light would never be extinguished. With such a magic item as a light source, even if the 9th floor of the underground tomb of Nasarick wanted to be gloomy, it wouldn't be gloomy. It was likely that anyone walking in the hallway would be moved by the beauty of this place. This was especially true for the people in the great underground tomb of Nasarick. There was no one who would not be moved when they walked on this floor that was originally occupied by the creators. Therefore, for the people in the underground tomb of Nasarick who were willing to give up everything to be loyal to the Supreme Sovereign, all the scenes and decorations here were worth loving. Every time they walked on this floor, everyone in the underground tomb of Nasarick would feel happy and reaffirm their loyalty to the creators. If someone didn't like the scenery here, then they weren't loyal enough to the Supreme Sovereign, or they had disloyal thoughts. That was the unanimous thought of everyone in the great tomb under Nasarick. Even Xiaotaya thought the same. However, this time, Zaisha did not feel happy at all. Instead, she felt unusually heavy. It wasn't just her mood. Even her footsteps were unbelievably heavy. Her beautiful face was filled with gloom. There was even a faint trace of despair on her face. What should I do? When Xiaotaya woke up from her dream and recalled everything that had happened, she almost fainted. This was because Xiaotaya remembered the person she was loyal to even if it cost her life. She swung her weapon. Why is it like this? Xiaotaya covered her face and was on the verge of crying. That must be a dream, right? After waking up from her sleep, Xiaotaya had told herself this more than once. There was no other way. Even Zatia herself did not want to believe that she had actually pointed her gun at the person she needed to be loyal to. That was tantamount to betrayal. No. In fact, that was betrayal. Even though Xiaotaya was under mental control at that time, it was just like what Heartwarming said. A mistake was a mistake, and a betrayal was a betrayal. Even if she had no choice, it was the truth. Xiaotaya could not forgive herself for that. It wasn't just because Noah was the person Satya had to pledge her loyalty to, it was also because Noah was the person Satya loved. Of course, there was something wrong with this love. In the game era, Xiaotaya's creator had set her up as a person with all kinds of inexplicable hobbies. Asexual. Sadist. Masochist. Necrophilia. All kinds of special fetishes that ordinary people wouldn't dare to compliment were gathered in Xiaotaya's body. When they first met, Noah used overwhelming strength to send all the guardians flying. When he used this as a test, it accidentally aroused the masochistic part of the vampire girl's heart. Since then, Xiaotaya had fallen madly in love with Noah. In this way, who could say that this kind of love was right? But there was no doubt that Xiaotaya did have special feelings for Noah. Waving her gun at the person she needed to be loyal to even if she had to die. Becoming an enemy of the person she loved the most. Under the double blow, the guilt in Xiaotaya's heart was even stronger than Heartwarming and Demiurgos had imagined. Boo-hoo. Xiaotaya covered her face, and her voice sounded like she was about to cry. How good would it be if I could atone for my sins with death? For the NPCs in the underground tomb of Nasaric, death was definitely the easiest way to atone for their sins. This was because they had long decided to dedicate their lives to the supreme ruler of the underground tomb of Nasaric. If possible, Xiaotaya really wanted to commit suicide now and end everything. However, Noah had ordered Xiaotaya to see him immediately after she woke up. Between death and orders, Xiaotaya chose the latter without hesitation. It was not that Xiaotaya was afraid of death. Instead, compared to death, Noah's orders were truly important. If she died under Noah's orders, she would be disobeying Noah's orders. Xiaotaya had already betrayed Noah once, so how could she disobey Noah's orders again? Therefore, no matter how heavy her footsteps were, Xiaotaya could only choose to continue. In fact, to Xiaotaya, it didn't matter if she was reprimanded by Noah. Taking her life or committing suicide to atone for her sins wasn't a problem at all. What Xiaotaya was truly afraid of was seeing Noah's disappointed expression. What should she do if she was abandoned by the supreme ruler she had to be loyal to even if she had to give up her life? How terrifying would it be if she disappointed her master? If Noah no longer trusted Xiaotaya because of this, it would definitely be countless times more painful than death for her. If that happens, I won't be forgiven even if I lose my life, Xiaotaya couldn't help but mutter under her depression. If Lord Noah is disappointed in Nasaric because of this and leaves this place, before she could finish her sentence, Xiaotaya's delicate body trembled violently as if she couldn't imagine such an outcome. She shook her head desperately. No. That can't be. That can't happen. Lord Noah is the most benevolent supreme ruler in this world. A benevolent king who can even save inferior creatures like humans. He definitely won't abandon us. It was as if Xiaotaya had deliberately said these words to convince herself. However, this sentence made the uneasiness in Xiaotaya's heart even more intense, making her footsteps even heavier. She walked forward with an ashen expression. As time passed, no matter how heavy Xiaotaya's footsteps were, she still arrived at the door of Noah's room. To Xiaotaya's surprise, there were two figures in front of the door. Heartbade and Dreamy. As if noticing Xiaotaya's arrival, Heartbade and Dreamy focused their gazes on her at the same time. At that moment, Xiaotaya didn't know if it was an illusion, but she felt that Heartbade and Dreamy's gazes were full of blame. This made Xiaotaya, who was already very uneasy, panic. You! Why are you here? Heartbade and Dreamy fell silent at the same time. Then, Dreamy spoke up. We came to report to Lord Noah because the results of the research on the maintenance costs of the underground tomb in Nasaric have come out. The maintenance costs of the underground tomb in Nasaric used to be the gold coins in Yggdrasil. Now, there was no longer a channel to obtain the gold coins in Yggdrasil. The underground tomb in Nasaric had to confirm whether the money in this world could be used for maintenance costs. This result was enough to affect the future development of the underground tomb in Nasaric. Compared to Heartbade and Dreamy, who were running around for this important matter, Xiaotaya, who had been controlled by the enemy and brought trouble to Noah, was simply too incompetent. Xiaotaya lowered her head guiltily. At that moment, Heartbade spoke. Since you're here, let's go in together. Xiaotaya could only nod. Chapter 1235. Katja, with the sound of the door opening, Heartbade, Dreamy, and the restless Satya entered Noah's room together. The luxurious suite was presented in front of the three guardians of Nasaric's underground tomb, causing a trace of solemnity to rise in the hearts of the three guardians. Coming to the residence of the supreme ruler of Nasaric's underground tomb, no NPC would not feel solemn. Even Xiaotaya, who was feeling extremely uneasy, was the same. Even Dreamy subconsciously lowered his voice. It seems that Lord Noah is still resting for the time being. In the underground tomb of Nasaric, all the creatures were of the xenomorph type. These xenomorph creatures almost never tired, didn't need to eat, and didn't need to rest or sleep at all. Therefore, xenomorph creatures were very troublesome to deal with for humans. For example, if humans and the undead were to go to war, then the undead's advantage would be simply unimaginable. Can you imagine, when you are exhausted from fighting on the battlefield, the lowest level skeleton is still waving its sword vigorously from start to finish? Can you imagine, when you haven't slept for 3 days and 3 nights, when you're really sleepy, the lowest level skeleton is still charging? Can you imagine, when your body urgently needs to replenish its food and recover its physical strength, the scene of the lowest level skeleton still relentlessly launching attacks? For humans, fatigue, sleep, and food were indispensable. However, the lowly undead didn't have such problems. Therefore, if humans and the undead were to go to war, the undead army could continuously fight a war of attrition. As long as they fought for 7 days and 7 nights without stopping, then no matter how large the human army was, it would be finished. Moreover, the human army needed food, but the undead army didn't. They could wait until the human army ran out of food, then the humans would be finished. In view of this, in the eyes of the undead, and even in the eyes of other races, humans who had no special abilities, were born with extremely low physical conditions, and had all kinds of needs were inferior creatures. Because the human race was too troublesome and too fragile, wasn't it? That's what everyone in the great tombs of Nasaric was thinking. Only Noah was an exception. To be more precise, in the eyes of everyone in the underground tomb of Nasaric, humans were reduced to inferior existences because of the need to rest. But when it came to Noah, they were instantly glorified. Ah! Ah ah ah! Heartbade clenched his hands tightly in front of him as if his heart was aching. He's actually still resting now. This must be the result of Lord Noah working so hard for the matter of Nasaric, right? We, the benevolent and merciful supreme beings, have worked too hard. Dreamy lowered his head guiltily. If we could be more useful and help share Lord Noah's burden, Lord Noah wouldn't have to work. Seataya didn't say anything, but her heart ached for Noah. The heavens took pity on him. Noah was just resting normally. If Noah were to know that the fact that he fell asleep on the bed was seen by the guardians as the result of working hard, he would definitely be embarrassed, right? Then, should we wake Lord Noah up? Satya asked softly. I feel that waking up an utmost exalted is a very rude and disrespectful thing to do. What do you all think? Satya is right. Heartbade sighed. If possible, I also hope that Lord Noah can rest well. Unfortunately, Lord Noah has already instructed that once there is a result on the maintenance costs of the underground tomb of Nasarek, we must report it even if he's resting. Demiurgos looked at Satya. Moreover, Lord Noah ordered you to see him immediately after you wake up. If you continue to procrastinate after waking up, I think Lord Noah will be angry, right? Hearing this, Satya's shoulders drooped. Then what should we do? There's no other way. Heartbade took a deep breath and said righteously. Although it's very disrespectful, let me wake up Lord Noah. As she said this, a blush suddenly appeared on Heartbade's serious and charming face, and her expression also became undulating. I heard that among humans, servants have to do something called a morning kiss to wake up their master. Only then will their master be in a good mood. Sure enough, I can only do this important task. Heartbade's words made Satya, who had been feeling uneasy, raise her eyebrows, and a disdainful smile appeared on her young but exceptionally beautiful face. Forget it. If Lord Noah is kissed by a big-mouthed gorilla like you, his mood will only deteriorate, right? In that case, wouldn't it be worse for you? Heartbade's youthful expression stiffened at Satya's words. After a slight distortion, it turned into a disdainful smile. If Lord Noah knew that a vampire approached him while he was asleep, I'm afraid he would be frightened awake no matter how good his dream is, right? This time, it was Satya's pretty face that stiffened and became slightly distorted. The two girls, one big and one small, emitted an evil aura that represented anger, causing the air in the room to become somewhat gloomy and cold. Just as Demiurgos felt that he should stop them, a weak voice sounded. What are you doing? Satya and Heartbade were startled at the same time. Together with Demiurgos, they looked toward the source of the voice. There, a neatly dressed Noah stood at the door of the bedroom, looking at Satya and Heartbade with narrowed eyes. Don't release that evil aura in someone else's room. If I hadn't woken up, would have been frightened awake by you, right? Lord Noah. The three guardians hurriedly knelt down on one knee. I'm very sorry. Forget it, I'm not really blaming you. Noah yawned, still looking a little sleepy. What time is it now? Lord Noah. Demiurgos lowered his head and said. According to the time on the surface, it should be around 7:00 in the morning. Is that so? Noah patted his cheeks and forced himself to wake up. Then, let's talk inside. After that, Noah walked directly to the inner office, opened the door, and walked in. Heartbade, Satya, and Demiurgos looked at each other, stood up, and walked into the office with Noah. In the luxurious office, as soon as Noah sat on the black leather chair, Heartbade immediately stepped forward. Lord Noah, regarding the issue of the maintenance cost of the Nasarek underground tomb, we have already come to a conclusion. Is that so? Noah nodded and said. But, let's talk about this later. Heartbade was slightly startled, then immediately understood what Noah meant. Under such circumstances, Noah turned his head and cast his gaze on Satya. Satya. Yes. Satya probably didn't expect to be called so suddenly. Her shoulders trembled violently, and her voice was abnormally loud. I'm here. At that moment, Satya's heart was filled with an extremely strong sense of uneasiness. Before discussing the important issue related to the future development of the Nasaric underground tomb, Noah chose to talk to Satya first. Does that mean that compared to the most important issue of the future development of the Nasaric underground tomb, Satya's betrayal is more serious? When she thought of this, Satya could not hide her uneasiness. However, the next moment, Noah said such a sentence. There shouldn't be any problems with your body, right? Such a sentence made Satya, who thought she would be reprimanded, stunned at first. Then, a look of guilt appeared on her face. Chapter 1236. There was no doubt that the cost of maintaining the underground tomb of Nasaric was unimaginably important to the entire underground tomb of Nasaric. Ever since the underground tomb of Nasaric had officially become operational, Heartwarming and Dreamy had been experimenting with the idea of finding out if the other gold coins could be used in addition to Yggdrasil. If they could be used, it would have a huge impact on the underground tomb of Nasaric. For the sake of the cost of summoning the high-level non-automatic rebirth monsters in the underground tomb of Nasaric, as well as the cost of activating the magic use in the base, as well as the cost of resurrecting NPCs when they died, and so on, once it was confirmed that the other gold coins could be used, the underground tomb of Nasaric would be able to develop rapidly while ensuring that they would be able to get enough money. After all, just by investing a large amount of money to summon a batch of high-level monsters, they would be able to increase the power and strength of the underground tomb of Nasaric at an extremely high efficiency. Although they still had to consider the various expenses that the underground tomb of Nasaric would need in the future, it was still better than not developing at all. If they couldn't use gold coins other than Yggdrasil to maintain the underground tomb of Nasaric, their future development would be greatly limited. Hence, this question was definitely the most important of all the matters in the underground tomb of Nasaric. Before Noah listened to such an important matter, he first called out to Satya. What did that mean? It meant that Satya's matter was more worthy of Noah's attention than such an important question. Initially, Satya thought that Noah was going to question her about her betrayal. However, Noah first asked about Satya's physical condition. Didn't that mean that in Noah's heart, Satya's safety was more important than the development of the underground tomb of Nasaric? However, Satya thought that Noah was going to question her. For the benevolent and merciful Supreme Overlord, how disrespectful and impolite was this? Wasn't it simply gauging the stature of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain? Lord Noah. Satya, who was full of guilt, could no longer bear it. She knelt on one knee and cried out in grief. Undoubtedly, as a guardian, I have committed such a stupid and serious crime. Please give me the harshest punishment. There was even a trace of pain in Satya's voice. However, Heartwarming and Dreamy could understand Satya's feelings very well. As long as it was an NPC in the underground tomb of Nasaric, they would be able to understand her feelings. Right? She had the purest of loyalty, but she had done something that she would never be willing to do. Even if she was controlled, it would be unforgivable to the NPCs in the underground tomb of Nasaric. If it's possible, I hope that I can atone for my sins with death. No, please give me a punishment that even death cannot compare to. Satya's voice sounded like a sob. Otherwise, I really can't forgive myself. Satya's Heartwarming and Dreamy kept their mouths shut. Noah looked at Satya, who was holding back her tears with a guilty expression, and sighed deeply. Satya, regarding your mind control, I am also in the wrong as the one who gave you the order. It can be said that I am the one who indirectly caused you to be controlled, so I really don't want to punish you. Furthermore, you didn't have a choice. I know that the benevolent and merciful Lord Noah will definitely forgive my stupidity. Satya hurriedly said. However, that was my fault for not being able to complete the mission given to me by the Supreme Sovereign and being controlled by the enemy. Lord Noah is definitely not wrong. Heartbade and Demiurgos inwardly nodded. Although Satya had acted because of Noah's orders, not only did she not complete the mission, but she also ended up being controlled by the enemy. That was because Satya was incompetent. No matter how they thought about it, it should not be Noah's fault. That was what Heartbade and Demiurgos were thinking. Of course, Noah definitely did not have the same thoughts. However, looking at the sorrowful Satya, Noah was also struggling in his heart. It was just like what Heartbade and the others said. Even if Noah thought that he was also in the wrong, Satya would definitely put all the blame on herself. If this sense of guilt was not properly relieved, it would definitely become an irremovable thorn in Satya's heart, right? Sometimes, being too loyal was not always a good thing. Noah immediately stood up from the black leather chair. Under Satya's stunned expression, he directly walked in front of her and knelt down on one knee like her. Lord Noah. Heartbade and Demiurgos were shocked. Satya shuddered and almost fainted. Now, the supreme ruler of the Nazarick underground tomb, the person whom everyone here was willing to sacrifice everything to be loyal to, was actually kneeling in front of a subordinate. If it weren't for the fact that there were only a few people here, perhaps the entire Nazarick underground tomb would have panicked. In this regard, Noah didn't care at all. He maintained the same height as Satya, looked into her eyes, and said very seriously, Satya, you know that you definitely feel a strong sense of guilt for what happened this time, but I feel the same way about it. After saying this, Noah extended his hand and gently stroked the head of the trembling Satya, who was almost scared out of her wits, as he spoke in a gentle voice. Even if you say that it's not my fault, there is no doubt that if I hadn't underestimated the people from the Si Lien cult nation and thought that you could easily take them down with your strength, which was why I casually gave the order and didn't consider the consequences carefully, you definitely wouldn't have been controlled. So, just like you, my fault can't be covered up. Noah shook his head gently. I know that you definitely won't accept my words, but at least let me apologize to you. I'm sorry, Satya. Sir Noah. Satya stared at Noah absent-mindedly. If you must punish me, then for your sake, I can do as you wish. Noah met Satya's gaze. But you have to remember that you're not allowed to mention anything about using death as an apology in the future. You once swore to me that you would give everything you have to me. You also said that your lives were all mine. Then, you carried all of my belongings with you, but when you made a mistake, you used my belongings to apologize. That's not right, is it? Noah's gaze swept across Heartbade, Demiurgos, and Zaisha as he spoke. So, all of you remember that your lives are mine. Without my permission, you're not allowed to lose them. Do you hear me? These words turned into a surge of heat that surged in the hearts of Heartbade, Satya, and Demiurgos. Without any hesitation, Heartbade and Demiurgos knelt on one knee at the same time. Together with Satya, who had her head lowered, they let out a voice that seemed to burst out from the depths of their souls. Yes, sir. Noah smiled faintly and stood up. He bent down and lifted Satya's chin, a slightly malicious smile on his face. As for Satya, your punishment will be left for tonight. Night. Tonight? Satya was startled at first. Then, she seemed to have thought of something and widened her eyes in ecstasy. Could it be, what is it? Noah said as if he was tempting a child. Come to my room tonight and you'll understand. Yes. Satya's voice was louder than before, and everyone could sense the joy in it. However, at this moment, the temperature in the room suddenly dropped. Night. Room. Night. Room. Punishment. Punishment. Punishment in the room at night. Heartbade lowered his head, and a smile appeared on his face as if he had broken it. That scene was enough to scare an ordinary person to death. Chapter 1237. After a while, Xiaotaya happily left Noah's office with a completely different mood from when she first arrived. Thus, only Noah, Heartwarming, and Demiyugos were left in the entire office. However, the three of them were in completely different moods. Noah was as relaxed as if he had solved an important matter, and sat back down on the black leather chair. Heartwarming was brimming with resentment. He looked at Noah like a resentful woman who had been left out of her room. His eyes were filled with resentment. Demiyugos, on the other hand, was still touched by Noah's words just now, and he cast a look of respect and longing at Noah. Noah, who had already expected Heartwarming's obvious resentment, ignored it, and acted as if nothing had happened. He spoke to Heartwarming and Demiyugos. "Well, Xiaotaya's matter has been resolved. Tell me what you plan to report." "Yes." Demiyugos lowered his head and replied. Then, he hurriedly nudged Heartwarming and gave him a look. Heartwarming pursed his lips and looked extremely unwilling, but he also knew that now was not the time to be jealous and envious. He could only stand up reluctantly. "Sir Noah." Heartwarming adjusted his mood, and his beautiful face regained its calmness. "Like I said just now, we have already come to a conclusion about the cost of maintaining the big underground tomb in Nasarek." "Is that so?" Noah leaned forward a little and asked seriously. "So, what's the result?" "The result is very gratifying." Heartwarming shared the good news. "Whether it's the gold coins in Yggdrasil, the gold coins from this world brought back from the surface, or even the gold coins given by Sir Noah, they can all be used to maintain the big underground tomb in Nasarek." Hearing this, Noah's eyes suddenly lit up. This was indeed an extremely good piece of news. If the gold coins of this world could really be used to maintain the big underground tomb in Nasarek, then there would be no need to deliberately save the gold coins in Yggdrasil in the treasure hall of Nazarek's underground tomb. They could develop without worry. In particular, the news that the gold coins given by Noah could also be used was even better. With a treasure house that could produce unlimited gold coins, there would be no need to worry about the cost of maintaining the big underground tomb in Nasarek in the future. At this moment, Demiyugos said. "However, we found that the three different types of gold coins used to maintain the big underground tomb in Nasarek have completely different degrees of consumption." "Completely different degrees of consumption?" Noah asked in confusion. "What's going on?" "This is the final confirmation after many experiments," Heartwarming replied. "We found that the different types of gold coins used to maintain the big underground tomb in Nasarek have different degrees of consumption. For example, if we use three different types of gold coins to summon the same type of monster, the degree of consumption is completely different." Demiyugos presented a prepared report. "Sir Noah can take a look at the details." Noah did not hesitate and directly took the report from Demiyugos and began to read it. After a while, Noah understood what was going on. Simply put, the three types of gold coins used to do the same thing were completely different degrees of consumption. For example, if he used the gold coins in Yggdrasil to summon a level 70 monster, he would need to spend 100,000 gold coins. However, if he used the gold coins of this world to summon a monster of the same level, type, and race, he would need to spend 200,000 gold coins. If he used the gold coins that Noah took out from the gate of Babylon, he would only need to spend 10,000 gold coins to summon the same monster. Other than the summoning of the monster, the rest of the costs showed the same result. In other words, for the big underground tomb in Nasarek, the value of the gold coins that Noah took out from the gate of Babylon was 10 times greater than the value of the gold coins in Yggdrasil. The gold coins in Yggdrasil were twice as valuable as the gold coins in this world. Naturally, under such circumstances, the expenditure of the three types of gold coins for the same purpose would naturally be different. After this experiment, we are sure of one thing. Heartwarming smiled slightly. That is, the problem of the maintenance cost of the big underground tomb in Nasarick can be used as long as it is gold coins. And the amount of money consumed is completely dependent on the gold content, Dreamy said. Among the 3 types of gold coins, the gold coins that Lord Noah gave us have the highest gold content, so the consumption time is also the least. The gold coins in Yggdrasil have the second highest gold content, which is only 1/10 of the value of the gold coins that Lord Noah gave us. As for the gold coins in this world, they have the least gold content. Compared to the gold coins in Yggdrasil, their value is only half, Heartwarming continued. Therefore, we are sure that the difference in cost is determined by the gold content. As long as it is gold coins, no matter where they come from, they can be used. So that's how it is. Noah came to a realization and smiled. In that case, we don't have to spend so much effort to earn money on the surface anymore, right? No, the money in this world still has its value. Dreamy shook his head. According to the information we have, in this world, different human countries use different gold coins. It is generally difficult to use the gold coins of other countries in another country. Presumably, apart from the gold coins of this world, it will be slightly troublesome to use the 2 types of gold coins we have in this world. And when the people in the big underground tomb in Nasarick make items, they need to consume materials. These will need to be obtained from this world in the future. Heartwarming nodded. If we have the gold coins of this world, then we can buy a large amount of materials from this world to make all kinds of items. That's true. Noah also nodded. This can indeed avoid a lot of trouble. In addition, we also found a coin box in Nasarick, Dreamy said with a smile. That is a tool used to exchange gold coins in Yggdrasil. As long as you put an item in, the coin box will be able to appraise the value of the item and exchange it for gold coins in Yggdrasil of the same value. What? Noah suddenly smiled helplessly. So there is a way to obtain gold coins in Yggdrasil. Then wouldn't my efforts be in vain? You can't say that, Heartwarming quickly said. After all, compared to gold coins, all kinds of items and magical tools are undoubtedly more useful. It would be a waste to put them in the coin box. Moreover, the value of the items appraised by the coin box will definitely be lower than the original value of the item. Even if you let someone with a merchant profession operate it, it will still be much lower than the original value. Dreamy agreed. So, as for the coin exchange box, it's better not to use it unless it's absolutely necessary. Noah nodded in understanding. Regardless of the value, compared to gold coins, Noah naturally hoped to obtain magical tools with all kinds of wonderful uses. If he ran out of gold coins, he could think of other ways to obtain them. However, if he ran out of precious magical tools, it would definitely be much harder to obtain them than gold coins. Moreover, compared to carrying money with him, magical tools that could be used at critical times were undoubtedly much more precious. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Noah would not exchange his precious items for gold coins. Thus, Noah stood up. All of you, come with me to the library. Heartwarming and Dreamy both nodded. Chapter 1238. On the 10th floor of the underground tomb of Nasarick, there was a huge library. It was a dark brown library. The atmosphere in the air was very calm, and there was a gentle magical light that illuminated every corner of the library. The high ceiling was circular. There was a huge door outside. The size of the door was comparable to the door of the throne room. On both sides of the door, there was a gorm that was more than 3 meters tall. The gorms had the appearance of a warrior, and their bodies flickered with a luster that normal stones or metals could not have. It was obvious that they were made from extremely rare materials. Although they were inanimate objects and their auras could not be sensed, the solemn atmosphere around the 2 gorms told others that they were definitely much stronger than normal gorms. With Noah in the lead, Heartfelt and Dreamy on his left and right like bodyguards, the three of them arrived in front of the huge door guarded by the Gorms. If it was anyone else in the underground tomb of Nasaric, they would have knelt down upon seeing Noah. However, the Gorms did not have intelligence, nor were they living creatures. They were just weapons, so they naturally did not have such knowledge. Thus, Heartfelt and Dreamy could not reprimand the two Gorms for being rude, and Heartfelt spoke loudly. "Open the door." Reacting to Heartfelt's words, the Gorms standing on both sides of the door suddenly moved. Like stone giants and robots, the two Gorms clumsily moved to the side and slowly pushed open the huge door. In the next moment, a space that was more like an art gallery than a library appeared in front of Noah's eyes. It was a space with all kinds of huge bookshelves. The walls, floor, and even the bookshelves were decorated with countless decorations. There was not even a speck of dust on the bright and clean floor, and beautiful patterns were drawn on it. There was also a huge wet mural on the ceiling. From here, one could see the second floor on both sides. After all, above the wall, there was a stand that protruded outwards. There were also rooms with entrances, and bookshelves were placed in the rooms. It looked like a heavenly kingdom of books. A few glass display cabinets with extremely precious books that were obviously different from ordinary books also entered Noah's eyes. A tranquil atmosphere filled the air. Noah, Heartfelt, and Dreamy walked into the library together. The door behind them was slowly closed by the two Gorms. Right now, Noah, Heartfelt, and Dreamy were in a place called the Realm of Reason. The huge library that existed in the 10th floor of the Great Tomb of Nasaric was divided into 3 sections: the space of knowledge, the space of reason, and the space of magic. Noah looked around and exclaimed as he walked along the aisles separated by bookshelves. "Is this the library on the 10th floor of the Nasaric catacombs?" In fact, Noah already knew about the existence of this library. That was because some of the books stored in this library were extremely precious to the Great Tomb of Nasaric. The books here could be divided into 5 types. The first type was the summoning book used to summon monsters. The summoning of high-level magical creatures that were not automatically reborn required a summoning ritual and a corresponding amount of money before it could be carried out. The item required for the summoning ritual was the summoning book. If one did not use the summoning book but used summoning magic to summon monsters, then the monsters that were summoned were the most common and low-level monsters. The monsters that were summoned using the summoning book were not only very rare, but their levels were also much higher than ordinary monsters. Even their magic, skills, and races were very rare. The second type was the item book used to store magical props. Some special and precious magical props with very powerful effects and functions were stored in these item books. The third type was the magic book used to use them. In Yggdrasil, sometimes, if one wanted to change into a specific profession or race, they would need the corresponding items. Among them, there were many items in the form of books. For example, the Book of the Dead that could transform people into undead, the Seed of the Fallen that could transform people into demons, and the Wings of Ascension that could transform people into angels, and so on. Using these items could allow one to change into a specific profession or even race. In Yggdrasil, such items had different values depending on the race and class of the player. The magic book stored here was the kind of item that could be used to change one's profession or race to an extremely precious profession. The fourth type was the information book used to create equipment, items, and items. The creation of some precious equipment, items, and items could not be done by just anyone. It was like a blueprint. The creation of precious equipment, items, and items required these information books in addition to materials. With these information books, as long as one had the required forging skills and materials, one could create the items recorded in them. As for the fifth type, they were novels. Most of them were classic novels that were widely circulated in the original world, or novels with the background of the game as the story. There were even original novels written by players in Yggdrasil, as well as second novels and game guides. Noah's goal on this trip was the first 4 types of books. The summoning books and information books were intended to be given to Heartwarming and Dreamy for their use. They would be used to summon monsters and create items, thus expanding the power and influence of Nazarik's underground tomb. The item books and magic books had wonderful uses. Naturally, Noah wanted to collect them. While expanding the treasury, he also wanted to prepare for an emergency. Of course, most of the summoning books and information books here had backups. Noah also planned to collect those books. Perhaps, in other worlds, if he needed manpower or specific items, Noah could make preparations with these summoning books and information books. It's just that there are so many books here, Noah exclaimed. Apart from the novels and guides, the summoning books, item books, magic books, and information books are all very useful and precious. There are so many of them here. The main ones are the novels and guides. Compared to the novels and guides, the other 4 types of books don't even add up to 1% of the total, right? Heartwarming said in an admiring tone. Even so, the number of summoning books, item books, magic books, and information books here is quite shocking. To be able to collect so many precious items, as expected of the supremes of the past. Dreamy nodded in agreement. He then turned his head and looked at Noah. Lord Noah, since you're here, would you like to see the scribe of the library? The scribe of the library. Noah nodded as he recalled the information about this NPC. That's fine. I also want to see how far the production of scrolls has progressed. After saying this, Noah walked forward. After an unknown amount of time, an inner door appeared in front of Noah. Heartwarming and Dreamy immediately went forward and opened the door. Immediately, a spacious room with huge bookshelves appeared in front of Noah's eyes. Upon closer inspection, the bookshelves were not filled with books, but with all kinds of miscellaneous items. There were ores, metals, gems, powders, and organs of unknown creatures on the bookshelves. These things were all materials needed to make scrolls. In addition, there was a large amount of parchment, either rolled up on the bookshelves or bundled up on the ground. They filled the entire room. In the center of the room was a large stone platform. On the side of the platform stood a skeleton. It was a skeleton that was a mixture of human and animal bones. It was only about 150 centimeters tall, had 2 horns on its head, 4 fingers, and hoof-shaped toes. It wore a long robe, had a turban on its head, and had pieces of cloth wrapped around its waist. Chapter 1239. Noah discovered that the skeleton standing at the edge of the stone platform not only had a strange appearance, but it was also wearing a lot of extraordinary equipment. A silver bracelet with 7 gems was worn on his wrist. On its neck was a golden amulet. On its fingers were rings of various shapes and colors. Its waist was also adorned with gem-like accessories, and there were also many scrolls tied to it. These equipment were all very powerful magic tools. Since it was able to wear so many magic tools, this seemingly extraordinary skeleton was naturally not an ordinary undying. Its name was Dietorius Enrich. He was in charge of guarding this library and was given the position of scribe. He was an NPC who specialized in crafting professions. In terms of combat power and level, Dietorius was not as good as a group of guardians who had reached the maximum level of 100. However, in terms of crafting professions, Dietorius was the #1 person in charge of the entire Nasarik underground tomb. This was especially true for the production of scrolls, as the scribe was the one who took up most of the responsibility. Without this scribe, the various tools that could be produced in the Nasarik underground tomb would definitely be of a lower grade. Therefore, although Noah had not seen Dietorius before, he at least knew of his existence. On the other side, Dietorius, who was studying a piece of parchment spread out on the stone platform in front of him, finally seemed to notice the situation at the door and raised his head. In the next second, when he saw Noah being protected by Heartwarming and Demiurgos, a scarlet light suddenly flashed in the eye sockets of Dietorius' skull, as if he was frightened, and quickly walked out of the stone platform. Then, Dietorius respectfully knelt in front of Noah. "Welcome, Lord Noah." Although they had not directly met each other, because of the settings, all the NPCs in the Nazarick underground tomb clearly knew who they were loyal to. In the past, Noah thought that if they had not met each other, the NPCs in the Nazarick underground tomb would not know that they were loyal to him. Therefore, he walked around the tomb with an indifferent attitude. In the end, there was almost a huge commotion. Since then, Noah understood that although the NPCs in the Nazarick underground tomb had not seen him before, they were very clear about his existence. At that moment, Noah was not surprised by Dietorius' reaction, and he smiled faintly. "Sorry, I came without informing you." "No, Lord Noah, you're too serious." There was no way to see the expression on Dietorius' skull face, but the sincerity in his voice could be heard. "The entire Nazarick underground tomb belongs to Lord Noah. Here, Lord Noah can't go anywhere, including this place." "Is that so?" Noah smiled bitterly. "I'm afraid that I'll disturb you. Aren't you making a scroll?" "It's just a scroll. How can it be more important than greeting the Honorable Supreme?" Dietorius lowered his head. "So, please don't say that, Lord Noah." "That's true, but the scroll you make will not only strengthen the Nazarick underground tomb, but it will also be of great help to me." Noah shook his head and said to Dietorius, "I'm also looking forward to the scroll you make, so you can speak with your head held high, Dietorius. It's my honor to be able to make the Honorable Supreme look forward to it." Dietorius seemed to be delighted. "I will definitely not disappoint the Supreme Sovereign's expectations." "Then I'll have to trouble you." Noah nodded and asked, "Is the production of the scroll going smoothly?" "There has been a lot of progress so far," Dietorius said respectfully. "At the very least, I can confirm that there are requirements for the parchment paper used to make scrolls with different levels of magical effects." "Oh?" Noah asked curiously. "How should I put it?" "After experimenting, I can basically confirm that the parchment paper brought back from the surface can only be used to make magic scrolls of the second level," Dietorius said. "As for the third level of magical effects, there's no way to use parchment paper to make them." "Is that so?" Noah frowned slightly. "In other words, the parchment paper in this world isn't suitable for making scrolls?" "I'm not sure yet. It could also be that my method of making scrolls is different from the method of making scrolls in this world," Dietorius said truthfully. "After all, I heard that the potions in this world are very different from the potions in the Nazarick underground tomb. In this world, under normal circumstances, there were 3 ways to make potions that were used as recovery potions. The first was a potion made from herbs. This kind of potion lacked speed and only had the effect of strengthening one's original abilities. For example, it could strengthen one's arm, recover one's stamina, or increase one's endurance. Not only was the effect not satisfactory, but there was also a big problem with the efficiency. The only advantage was that it was very cheap. The second was a potion made from a mixture of magic and herbs. The effect of this kind of potion would be faster than the first, but it still required time. Most adventurers preferred to use this kind of potion. After a battle, they would drink a bottle and slowly recover. The third type was a potion that was made using only magic. This kind of potion was made by injecting magic into an alchemy solution. The effect of the potion would be immediately apparent and had the same effect as the magic that was injected. It was similar to magic scrolls and magic tools that could only be used on oneself. Therefore, this kind of potion was also more expensive. Compared to these three kinds of potions, the potions in the Nasaric underground tomb were different. Judging from this, the difference in the production method had a big impact on the items that were made. With my production method, no matter how many times I experiment with the parchment paper that is brought back from the outside, as long as it is used to make scrolls that exceed the third level, it will immediately be scrapped, Dietorius said regretfully. However, if you use higher-level paper materials, you can make higher-level magic scrolls. If you use the highest-level paper materials, such as dragon skin, you can even make a 10th-level magic scroll without any problems. Dragon skin. Noah was deep in thought. Dragon skin was, of course, a high-level item that couldn't be any higher. After all, whether it was this world, the game, or even the other worlds, creatures like dragons were generally more powerful creatures. In this world, dragons were even known as the strongest race. The skin that could only be obtained after hunting dragons was naturally extremely precious. However, there were many dragon skins in the Nasaric underground tomb's treasure hole. It was an item that the members of Ain's Ol Gong spent a lot of effort to obtain. If it took so much effort to do so in the game, it would be even more difficult to do so in this world. It is said that in this world, dragons are the most powerful creatures, and they are also very rare, Dietorius said. In a situation where we can't guarantee a way to obtain dragon skin, I think that it is better to limit the use of the precious dragon skin. Without a supply, it is undoubtedly foolish to use it continuously. Upon hearing this, Noah chuckled and said, "Don't worry. If it is dragon skin, you can use it as much as you want." Dietorius couldn't help but be stunned. "Don't worry, I have a way to ensure that the dragon skin resources will not be cut off." Noah suddenly smiled. "So, you can use it as much as you want?" "Yes," Dietorius immediately replied. Noah thought of the many resources that could be automatically replenished in the Gate of Babylon. Among them, dragon skin was included. It seems that I can take out a lot of resources for Nasaric to use. Thinking of this, Noah looked at Yair Bade and Demiurgos. "Get someone to come here and choose the summoning books and information books that need to be used, and prepare a backup. Also, arrange the item books and magic books. I want to bring them with me." "Yes." Yair Bade and Demiurgos bowed their heads and accepted the order. Chapter 1240. Although he had asked Yair Bade and Demiurgos to organize the summoning books, item books, magic books, and information books, it was not a task that could be completed in a short period of time. After all, the number of books in the library on the 10th floor of the underground tomb in Nasaric was simply outrageous. This library was the largest one Noah had ever seen, be it in terms of size or collection of books. Fortunately, more than 99% of the books were just simple strategies and novels. Although the remaining 1% of summoning books, item books, magic books, and information books were just as numerous, it would not take too long to organize them, even if it could not be completed in a short period of time. With the manpower that Yair Bade and Demiurgos had gathered, it would probably take about 2 to 3 days. Under such circumstances, Noah directly handed the task of organizing the library to Yair Bade and Demiurgos. He then stayed in the library for an entire day, reading the novels and strategies with great interest, and only left the library when it was dark. Along with Noah, Yair Bade left as well. On the way to his room, Noah sensed the aura following closely behind him. He was speechless as he turned around to look at Yair Bade. "Yair Bade, why have you been following me?" "I was thinking that Lord Noah must be very tired after a busy day today, right?" Yair Bade said with a smile that was as gentle as a goddess, but there was no smile in his eyes. "So, as your subordinate, please at least allow me to watch Lord Noah fall asleep. Otherwise, I won't be at ease." "Is that so?" Noah rubbed his eyebrows, and said directly. "Then, what is the truth?" His words made the gentle smile on Heartbade's face become slightly distorted, and he became as sinister as a demon. How can I watch Satya beat me to it? Those were Heartbade's heartfelt words. Heartbade remembered them clearly. In the morning, when Noah decided to punish Satya, he asked her to go to his room at night. A man and a woman alone in a room with a punishment. Who wouldn't be worried? At the very least, Heartbade couldn't be at ease. How can he do such an enviable thing with Satya alone? Heartbade's body was emitting a black aura, and his smile became more and more twisted. That's not a punishment at all, but the best reward. That fellow, Satya, actually accepted it with a clear conscience. As a guardian, she's too unqualified. Seeing that Heartbade was about to go crazy, Noah's eyes twitched. He could only sigh and look at Heartbade with narrowed eyes. In other words, you want me to do the same to you, right? That's right. The black smoke around Heartbade's body instantly disappeared without a trace. His face was flush red, and he began to twist and turn in an extremely intoxicated manner. May the benevolent and merciful Supreme Sovereign bestow upon me an equal reward, no punishment. Upon hearing this, Noah stared at Heartbade speechlessly. Under Noah's gaze, Heartbade gradually woke up from his intoxicated state, and his pretty face suddenly became somewhat unnatural. That. May I ask what I did wrong? No, you didn't do anything wrong. Noah suddenly smiled, and it was an extremely mischievous smile. However, since it's the request of the Chief Guardian, who has worked hard and performed a great service, then I'll fulfill your wish and let you suffer the same punishment as Satya. Seeing Noah's smile, for some reason, Heartbade had an ominous premonition in his heart. However, this ominous premonition was immediately drowned out by ecstasy. Finally, Heartbade's tears flowed out. I've finally waited for the time when the Supreme Sovereign will favor me. While saying this, Heartbade seemed to have thought of something. He twitched the tip of his nose and sniffed his own body. Then, his expression changed, and he hurriedly said to Noah, Lord Noah, please give me some time. I'll go take a bath first. After saying this, Heartbade slipped away with a whoosh and disappeared without a trace. What bath are you taking? Noah looked in the direction Heartbade had left, and the corners of his mouth lifted slightly. Anyway, it's not something that can only be done after taking a bath. After saying this, Noah turned around, feeling amused. However, when he turned around, a figure with a fragrant body and a bright smile appeared in front of Noah's eyes. I'm done. Lord Noah. Isn't this a little too fast? 3 minutes later, Noah brought Heartbade, who had taken a quick bath and was in an extremely good mood, to the door of his room. Heartbade's face was full of anticipation, and his eyes were surging with desire as he thought about what would happen next. Inside, Satya was holding a mirror and constantly looking at herself. Her pretty face was full of blush, and she looked like a young girl in love. In response, Noah inwardly chuckled and walked over. As soon as she heard footsteps, Satya immediately stopped what she was doing and looked over with anticipation and joy. When she saw Noah's figure, Shesha's tender and cute face was filled with heartfelt joy. However, when Satya saw Heartbade behind Noah, the blush and joy on her face froze and became dangerous. Why are you here? He didn't even need to think to know who he was talking to. Facing Shesha's dangerous expression, Heartbade looked at her with a provocative gaze and spoke with a victorious expression. Lord Noah has decided to give me the same reward. No punishment. So, Satya, I'm here to be punished with you. Together. Shesha's expression became even more dangerous, and she looked at Heartbade with murderous eyes. You hateful slut, how dare you ruin my plans, what? Don't tell me you don't want to be together. Heartbade looked down at Shatia condescendingly and said, "In that case, you can ask Lord Noah to waive your punishment. I can bear it alone." "How is that possible?" Shatia yelled with a fierce expression. "Fine, let's do it together. It's better than letting you beat me to it. Don't think that we'll be tied if we do it together." Heartbade also revealed a sinister expression. "I'll definitely make Lord Noah punish me first." "Humph." Shatia snorted in disdain. "Let's wait and see." As a result, the two guardians of the underground tomb glared at each other, and there were even sparks in their gazes. Little did they know that looking at Heartbade and Shatia, the smile on Noah's face was also very bright. It was a smile that looked like a prank that was about to succeed. When Heartbade and Shatia entered the room under Noah's lead and arrived in the hall, the two girls saw it at the same time. There was a crystal ball on the table in the hall. It was something that wasn't originally in this room. "Lord Noah?" Heartbade asked in puzzlement. "What's this? Are you talking about this crystal ball?" Noah stepped forward and patted the huge crystal ball. "This is your next punishment." "Our next punishment?" Heartbade and Shatia were stunned on the spot. Seeing this, Noah shrugged and slowly stroked the crystal ball. The next moment, the crystal ball suddenly lit up and a scene appeared. It was a scene of many densely packed black dots crawling on the ground. "This is..." Shatia said with some uncertainty. "Ants?" "Yes." The densely packed black dots crawling on the ground were all ants. "Both of you, listen carefully," Noah suddenly said. "Next, you will stay here and count ants." "Count? Count ants?" Heartbade and Shatia were completely stunned. "That's right, and you have to count until dawn," Noah said with a faint smile. "Tomorrow, I will ask you how many ants are crawling on the crystal ball. If you answer correctly, your punishment will be over. If you answer incorrectly, you will continue counting the next night. If you keep answering incorrectly, you will continue counting. This is your punishment." Heartbade and Shasha's vision turned black at the same time and they fell to the ground. Chapter 1241. The next day, when Noah woke up from his sleep, the familiar soft touch and body temperature in front of him awakened the rest of his muddled consciousness. Opening his eyes, Noah felt the light weight in front of him as he reached out and slowly lifted the blanket. In the next moment, a cute elf girl appeared in Noah's field of vision. Huff! Huff! The girl seemed to still be in a deep sleep. Her extremely subtle breathing sound faintly rose and fell in the silent space, making the air seem to carry a slight fragrance. The silver-white long hair was extremely soft as it hung down her slender and white back, covering the elf girl's entire back. The elf girl was completely naked, only wearing a pair of black knee socks. She hugged Noah's neck as usual, snuggling into Noah's embrace, directly pressing down on Noah's body as she slept sweetly. Who else could it be other than Aster? This familiar scene made Noah's expression involuntarily relax. Gently stroking Aster's soft silver-white hair and looking at the elf girl's naked body in his arms, Noah didn't have any evil thoughts in his heart, only warmth. Under normal circumstances, as long as there was no one beside Noah, then the next morning, Noah would find Aster in the same state, sleeping in his arms. It wasn't that Noah hadn't tried to wake up in the middle of the night. However, Aster didn't appear in this state in the middle of the night. Thus, Noah judged that Aster should only wake up in the morning, turn into her human form, lie in his arms, and continue to sleep. Then, after dawn, if Aster woke up earlier than Noah, then this elf girl would use all kinds of methods that would excite a healthy male to wake Noah up. If Noah had woken up earlier than Aster, he would have seen this young lady who looked more like an animal than an elf appear in this form. Thus, Noah lovingly kissed the tip of Aster's nose, then quietly got up and quietly got off the bed without waking Aster up. Covering Aster with the blanket, Noah smoothed the bangs in front of the sleeping Aster's forehead, then straightened up and began to wash up. Walking out of the bedroom, the hall appeared in front of Noah's eyes. Noah gently closed the bedroom door and cast his gaze into the hall. There, Heartwarming and Zaisha were sitting side by side at the table in the hall. On the table, a large crystal ball was still playing the scene of a group of densely packed ants crawling across the ground. Heartwarming and Zaisha stared at this scene, as if they were broken puppets, muttering in a daze, 13768548813. 13768548814. 13768548815. It was clear that the two girls were still counting the ants. Looking at Heartwarming and Zaisha shaking their heads and muttering absent-mindedly like broken puppets, Noah felt a little guilty. Poor Heartwarming and Zaisha were full of expectations that Noah would favor them, but in the end, they were met with a cruel punishment. The feeling of falling from heaven to hell must be very uncomfortable, right? Moreover, the two girls' punishment was to count ants for a night. The densely packed ants crawling across the surface of the crystal ball at a rather fast speed. Not to mention counting for a night, even counting for a minute would make one feel dizzy and faint, right? However, it was precisely because of this that it could be considered a punishment. If he really punished Zaisha severely, then Noah wouldn't be able to bear it. But if the punishment was too light, then it wouldn't be able to eliminate the guilt in Zaisha's heart. In that case, how could he make Zaisha feel afraid and punished without causing any substantial damage? This was the method that Noah thought of. Presumably, even Zaisha would go crazy from counting ants for a night, right? Moreover, Zaisha's patience wasn't very good to begin with, so it would be even more effective as a punishment. As for Heartwarming, it would be an undeserved calamity. While, as demons and vampires, Heartwarming and Zaisha were creatures that did not need to sleep or eat, and they were races that did not tire. It was not a bad thing to have some fun. Of course, even if the two girls counted wrongly, Noah did not intend to let them continue. If they really had to count like this every night, then even demons and vampires would probably go crazy. Thus, Noah approached the two girls with a faint smile on his face. Okay, Heartwarming, Zaisha, you can stop now. After Noah's voice sounded, the two girls looked up as if they had just woken up from a dream. They looked at Noah blankly with a melancholy expression. Seeing how Heartwarming and Zaisha were staring at him blankly, the faint smile on Noah's face began to slowly disappear and was replaced by a trace of worry. Don't tell me that Heartwarming and Zaisha have really gone crazy from counting ants for an entire night. Just as Noah was worried about this, Heartwarming suddenly lowered his head slowly, letting the bangs in front of his forehead cover his expression, and his body trembled slightly. That appearance made Noah feel a little scared. Yeah. Heartwarming? Noah asked with some trepidation. You. What's wrong with you? At this moment, Heartwarming suddenly moved. Bang! Accompanied by a muffled sound, a force exploded in Noah's arms, making Noah lose his balance. Noah only felt his vision spinning, and then there was another impact on his back. The scene on the ceiling was fixed in Noah's vision. In other words, Noah was now lying on the ground. Moreover, he was knocked down by an abnormally soft object. As for what that abnormally soft object was, there was no need to guess. Sir Noah, Heartwarming, who was riding on Noah and pressing Noah down, raised his upper body and met Noah's gaze. At this moment, Noah discovered that Heartwarming's beautiful gem-like pupils were slightly enlarged, like a snake eyeing its prey. This made Noah shiver all over. Yeah. Heartwarming. Noah's voice couldn't help but raise a little due to panic. You. What are you doing? In the face of Noah's questioning, who had lost his calm and had fallen into a state of panic, Heartfelt acted as if he didn't hear anything. It was as if he was completely immersed in his own world and couldn't hear anything from the outside world. "I can't hold it in anymore," Heartfelt said drunkenly, as if he was drunk. "I keep telling myself, I have to hold on. I have to hold on. As long as I hold on, until I finish counting the ants, then I will be able to obtain Sir Noah's favor. Now. Now. Finally, this moment has come. Right? Cold. Calm down, Heartfelt." Noah could only struggle to get up. "Get off of me first." However, no matter how much Noah struggled, there was no way for him to break free from Heartfelt's restraints. "My level has already reached LV4, and my all ability is at the SSS stage. In terms of physical ability, I am stronger than Hercules, who descended in the form of a servant, but there is no way for me to push Heartfelt away." In fact, Noah couldn't push Heartfelt away. Firstly, it was because Heartfelt was a max-level warrior character with extremely high physical attributes. Secondly, it was because the place he touched was too soft, so Noah couldn't use his full strength. In such a situation, Heartfelt murmured in a daze. "It's all Sir Noah's fault. Undoubtedly, I'm looking forward to it, but I can't get what I want." "That's right. It's all Sir Noah's fault." The corners of Noah's mouth began to twitch. It was at this time that Xiaotaya made her move. "That's right. It's all Lord Noah's fault." Zaisha stood up shakily and suddenly raised her head. Like a predator, she bared her fangs and brandished her claws as she pounced towards Noah. "It's all Sir Noah's fault." Noah was directly pounced on. Together with the two girls, he rolled on the ground in a sorry state. "That's enough." Noah couldn't stand it anymore and roared. Chapter 1242. Noah's Gate of Babylon was a treasure trove jointly built by Gaia and Alea, the two suppressive forces. Even the hero King Gilgamesh, who claimed to have all the treasures of an era, could only stare at the treasures inside. Noah's Gate of Babylon had all kinds of rare resources such as fine steel, dragon skin, and so on. In addition, Noah's Gate of Babylon had the ability to automatically replenish consumables. There were many resources that were extremely precious in the eyes of others, but they were inexhaustible and inexhaustible. For the development of the underground tomb in Nasarek, Noah asked Heartfelt and Demiurgos to sort out all the summoning books, item books, magic books, and information books in the library to enrich the Gate of Babylon. At the same time, he also took out many of the precious resources in the Gate of Babylon and provided them to the underground tomb in Nasarek for use. With these precious resources, the production of all kinds of items in the underground tomb in Nasarek would definitely be fruitful. As for the summoning books, item books, magic books, and information books that Heartfelt and Demiurgos sorted out, they were all put into Noah's Gate of Babylon. Heartfelt and Demiurgos took the copies of the summoning books and information books with them. They also took a large amount of gold coins from Noah and prepared to summon high-level monsters. They also started to let the NPCs in the crafting department use the information books to create all kinds of equipment, items. As for the summoning books, considering that the space in the underground tomb in Nasarek was limited, Heartfelt and Demiurgos still needed to discuss how to use them. Otherwise, if they only carried out the summoning, the sudden increase in the population of the underground tomb in Nasarek would definitely cause these monsters to become a burden. Therefore, what kind of monsters to summon, 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 what kind of requirements there were in terms of race, profession, skills, and magic, etc., were all things that needed to be discussed. Noah handed all of this over to Heartfelt and Demiurgos. It wasn't that Noah wanted to be a hands-off manager. It was just that Heartfelt and Demiurgos were definitely more familiar with the situation in the great graveyard in Nasarick than Noah. Moreover, he was much more familiar with it. Since that was the case, rather than getting involved, it was better to let Heartfelt and Demiurgos take full responsibility to prevent them from ruining things. Noah did not want to give orders carelessly due to insufficient information and cause something like Shadia to happen again. Therefore, it was better to leave everything here to Heartfelt and Demiurgos. As for Noah himself, he would occasionally listen to the reports from Heartfelt and Demiurgos, and learn about the operation of each floor of the great tomb of Nasarick from the other guardians. When he was free, he would check on the management system in the throne room. His days were quite fulfilling. On this day, Noah was browsing through the management system in the throne room. Through the management system's display of the operation of the great tomb of Nasarick, Noah could easily see that the number of monsters in the entire stronghold was increasing. In addition, various facilities responsible for producing equipment, items were also operating in full swing. Presumably, every once in a while, these facilities would produce a batch of equipment, items to fill the inventory of the great tomb of Nasarick, right? It's going well, Noah said as he flipped through the main window that appeared in front of him. If it continues to develop at such a high speed, can the supply of resources be maintained? The problem with gold coins was no longer a problem after confirming that no matter what kind of gold coin it was, as long as it contained gold, it could be used. However, producing equipment, items not only required gold coins, but also various materials. Although Noah's treasure trove had almost everything, it was only relative to the shaped moon world. In this world and the game world, there were many things that were not in Noah's treasure trove. Otherwise, Noah would not be tempted by the items in the treasure hall and library of the great tomb of Nasarick. The resources in the treasure trove are not lacking, but the resources that are not in the treasure trove are limited. Noah said thoughtfully. Should I slightly control the projects that consume limited resources? Just as Noah was thinking about this problem, outside the door in front of him, a figure slowly walked in. It was Annabelle. Aware of Annabelle's arrival, Noah raised his head slightly and looked over. At the same time, Annabelle said such a sentence to Noah with a rather serious expression. Sir Noah, there is an intruder. Noah's eyebrows suddenly raised. On the ground quite far away from the great tomb of Nasarick where the throne hall was located, outside the great tomb of Nasarick that presented the scene of a tomb, 2 uninvited guests were welcomed. Wow! I didn't expect there to really be a tomb here. You scared me. At the entrance, Clementine pointed at the tomb in front of her with a frivolous and exaggerated attitude and said with a laugh. There is actually a tomb in the middle of this grassland, isn't this too strange? Right? Right? Humph! Looking at the extremely pretentious Clementine, Cadget snorted coldly, but also showed a somewhat excited smile. I didn't expect there to be such a harvest. This is really unexpected. Clementine and Cadget came here only to find the magic chanter who scared away Yelantel's adventurers and had the ability to summon extremely powerful undeads. Because Cadget often dealt with undeads, he had a certain ability to track down the unique negative energy of undeads. When he planned to track down the powerful undeads that were summoned, he unexpectedly discovered this tomb. Clementine grinned, but her eyes cast a sharp gaze like that of a ferocious beast, sweeping the interior of the tomb. Clementine could clearly see. In the tomb, the grass had been carefully cut, and she could see at a glance that someone was carrying out regular maintenance. Needless to say, there must be people who come here often. Clementine looked at the ancestral hall in the center of the tomb and showed a ferocious smile like that of a predator. There might even be people who are like little Cadget, living directly with those dead fellows. Who knows? I just don't know if that person is the one we are looking for. Cadget sneered again and again. The only thing we can be sure of is that there is very powerful negative energy in this tomb, and there is definitely very powerful undeads inside. It was precisely because of this that Kadjit felt both excited and nervous. He was excited because since there was a very powerful undeads here, it meant that there was a large number of low-level undeads, which could allow the powerful undeads to be born. The existence of a large number of undeads meant a large amount of negative energy. Kadjit's goal was precisely this negative energy. However, facing such an undead's army that had a powerful undeads as their commander, could the two of them win? This was what made Kadjit nervous. What? Clementine said in a light tone. Little Kadjit, are you scared? What about you? Kadjit looked at Clementine speechlessly. Aren't you scared? Scared? Clementine seemed to be amused, laughing loudly in a way that was completely unlike a young girl. That laughter was extremely sharp, so sharp that it was even a little disgusting. With such a loud laugh, Clementine held her abdomen, and her voice carried a hair-raising cruelty. Although I don't know what is inside, but I have already surpassed mortals and reached the hero domain, so I definitely can't lose. However, just as such a sentence fell from Clementine's mouth, a mocking voice suddenly sounded, and very clearly drilled into Clementine and Kadjit's ears. Hero domain. That's really amazing, isn't it? I'm a little scared. Chapter 1243. The voice that suddenly echoed in the entire space came so abruptly. The cruel smile on Clementine's face suddenly froze on her face, and Kadjit's expression also changed abruptly, making the entire atmosphere tense. The first to calm down was Clementine. While Kadjit's expression was still changing wildly, Clementine restrained her expression, raised her head, and cast her sharp gaze like that of a carnivorous beast towards the cemetery in front of her. She saw that in the cemetery, a figure was slowly walking out from the path in front of the centermost large ancestral hole. Although I really want to ask how you found this place. Saying this, Noah walked out of the cemetery while watching Clementine and Kadjit, and his eyes gradually narrowed. But, if you think about it carefully, I didn't purposely get people to hide the large underground tomb in Nassarik, so it's natural that it would be found, right? That being said, Clementine and Kadjit obviously didn't come to the large underground tomb in Nassarik by chance. Whether it was Clementine or Kadjit, although they were surprised by Noah's appearance, they weren't surprised. Clearly, these two uninvited guests had come prepared. Or rather, Clementine and Kadjit came for Noah. Oh. Is there really someone here? Clementine's somewhat unsightly smile hung on her face again, but her gaze was always sizing up Noah. Hey, don't tell me you're the one who scared the hell out of those adventurers in Yelantir. What? Is that your friend? Noah stopped and looked at Clementine from a distance as he spoke lightly. You don't look like you're here to avenge someone. That kind of thing, no matter what. Clementine tilted her neck and grinned like a broken doll. I just want to confirm if you're interesting, that's enough. Is that so? Noah muttered to himself for a while, then looked at Kadjit as if he was no longer interested in Clementine. Then, what are you here for? I heard you're a magic chanter who can summon extremely powerful undead. Kadjit gripped the black staff in his hand tightly and stared at Noah. Why don't you let me see how your summoning magic is? Oh. Noah raised his eyebrows and finally smiled. In other words, if you're not here to pick a fight, then you're here to challenge me, right? Pick a fight. Challenge me. Clementine was startled at first, then burst out laughing. Good. That's a good way of putting it. I like that way of putting it. In the next second, Clementine's laughter came to an abrupt halt. A killing intent that was as sharp as a blade that made one's skin hurt suddenly erupted from her body. That's right. I'm here to pick a fight. As soon as she finished speaking, Clementine stomped her feet on the ground and shot forward. In the meantime, in Clementine's hand, a short awl suddenly flashed and was held in her hand. As she waved it, it tore the air apart. With a sharp sound of wind breaking, Clementine flashed in front of Noah with a sneer. That speed was as fast as the wind. Shio dash. In the next moment, the sharp short awl was stabbed out by Clementine. The target was Noah's eyes. Ding dash. A crisp sound of collision shook the air slightly. It was the sound of a finger blocking the short awl that was piercing towards him like a bullet with the tip of his finger. I see. Ignoring Clementine's surprised expression, Noah said understandingly. In other words, I don't have to show you mercy, right? As soon as he finished speaking. Bang dash. A burst of violent magic rose from Noah's body and turned into a substantial shockwave that suddenly shook and surged out. Dong dash. In a low muffled sound, Clementine was directly sent flying by the substantial shockwave of magic. Her feet brushed against the ground and she was forced to retreat a distance of more than 10 meters before she could stabilize herself. Tisk. Clementine held her chest that hurt from the shockwave and made a speechless sound. That bastard, not only is he a magic chanter, but he's also a monk. Although Clementine's short awl did not have high lethality, it could not be more fragile than a human body. To be able to use a finger to block the sharp short awl, there was no other possibility other than a monk who could train his body to the strength of various metals. No, maybe that guy activated some defensive magic when I didn't know, or maybe it was the power of some magic tool. Clementine overturned her previous guess. How can a magic chanter who has the ability to summon a powerful immortal also be a monk at the same time? Noah raised his eyes slightly in response to Clementine's self-muttering guess. He looked at her and said with a faint smile on his face. Is that so? After saying that, Noah's body suddenly shook, and his figure disappeared on the spot. Clementine's eyes shrunk, and without hesitation, she stomped on the ground and retreated. However, just as Clementine's figure retreated, a ghostly figure suddenly appeared behind her and reached out a hand and put it on Clementine's back. Feeling the touch of the hand on her back, Clementine's face finally changed. Then, a voice entered Clementine's ears. Are you a magic chanter? Or a monk? Why don't you guess again, a big shot who has stepped into the realm of heroes? At this moment, Clementine felt like there was a knife on her neck, and an extremely strong sense of crisis rose in her heart. It was only then that Clementine understood. Whether it was a magic chanter or a monk. As long as Noah slightly moved the hand on Clementine's back, Clementine's end was obvious. Without any hesitation, Clementine almost subconsciously turned around and fiercely thrust out the short awl in her hand. However, at the same time, a fist mixed with a terrifying wind carried a chilling momentum and directly smashed in Clementine's direction. Chapter 1244. The cool breeze, mixed with the smell of soil, blew through the surface graveyard of Nazarek's underground graveyard, causing the tense atmosphere in the air to suddenly become heavy. Looking at Noah, who was standing against the wind with his robe fluttering in the breeze, Kadget's expression became extremely ugly. However, compared to his ugly expression, Kadget's heart was more terrified of Noah. How is this possible? Kadget murmured in disbelief. How can there be a guy who can defeat that woman so easily? Kadget did not have a good impression of Clementine. There was no other reason other than that Clementine was a person with a personality defect. In the Celian theocracy, there were a total of 6 special intelligence units, and the unit called the Dark Scripture was the most special one. It was not like the Sunshine Scripture, which had hundreds of people, and there were only a few dozen of them. However, the Dark Scripture, formed by these dozen of people, was the trump card of the entire Celian theocracy. There was only one condition to be able to join the Dark Scripture. That was to at least reach the level of a hero. In other words, in the Dark Scripture, every member had to be at least level 29, and their strength was comparable to the highest level of a fine steel adventurer. Clementine came from such a unit where everyone was at the level of a hero. However, Clementine betrayed the Dark Scripture. The reason was that Clementine wanted to snatch a magical tool that was not of much use to her on a whim. Since then, Clementine betrayed the Dark Scripture, revealing her ferocious and cruel side. This woman loved to torture people. Moreover, no matter if it was an enemy or an innocent passerby, as long as Clementine had that thought, she would not hesitate to use the cruelest methods to torture people. Cadgett was not a good person. Otherwise, he would not have wanted to turn the entire Yelander into a dead city for his own purpose, to collect negative energy. However, it was impossible for Cadgett to have a good impression of such a person with a personality defect. However, he had to admit that at least, in terms of strength, Clementine was indeed quite strong. Cadgett believed that even if Gudjefu was the strongest warrior in the kingdom, Clementine would still be able to fight him to a draw. How could such a person be defeated in 2 or 3 moves by this man of unknown origin? What kind of joke was this? What? Aren't you coming over? Seeing Cadgett's ugly face, Noah sneered. You're the ones who came looking for trouble, and I've personally come out to accept the challenge. Why don't you show some promise? Don't underestimate me. Cadgett's heart was filled with anger as he whispered in a hoarse voice. Even if you can defeat that person with a personality defect, as a magic chanter, you will never be able to defeat me. With these words, Cadgett raised the hand that wasn't holding the black staff. In that hand, there was a pitch-black bead, so black that it was beginning to turn purple. Clementine had once said that the summoning magic that Cadgett could use was of a lower level, but it could be amplified through precious magical tools and unleash great power. That magic tool was the bead in Cadgett's hand. Just watch. The power of my orb of death. Cadgett roared loudly. Come out for me. Bone Dragon. As his voice fell, a dazzling light suddenly flickered on the pitch-black orb. Following the activation of the magic tool called the Orb of Death, the entire ground began to tremble. Noah's eyebrows slightly wrinkled. With his outstanding sensing ability, Noah could clearly feel it. Underground, there were 2 more auras. Gotcha! Immediately after, the ground in front of Cadgett cracked and slowly protruded. Ping dash! The protruding ground suddenly exploded, revealing 2 gargantuan figures. They were 2 colossal creatures that were more than 3 meters tall and formed from countless human bones, with long necks and bones forming wings. Impressively, they were bone dragons. Roar dash! The 2 bone dragons' eye sockets flashed with ominous glints as they faced Noah's direction and let out a roar that shook the atmosphere. Ha 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 ha! Just watch. This is the power of the Orb of Death. The appearance of the bone dragon seemed to have restored Cadgett's confidence, and he let out an unpleasant laugh. The bone dragons have an absolute resistance to magic. No matter what kind of magic chanter you are, they are invincible natural enemies. Even if you defeat that person with a flawed personality, as a magic chanter, you definitely can't win against 2 bone dragons. Cadgett, who was laughing like this, didn't notice. Noah, who stood against the wind amidst the sound waves emitted by the 2 bone dragons, had traces of interest and ridicule in his eyes. The interest was towards the Orb of Death in Cadgett's hands. Although he didn't know what kind of magic tool it was, there wasn't such an item in the large underground tomb of Nassarik, which made Noah quite interested. As for the ridicule, it was directed towards Cadgett. In the battle with Clementine just now, Noah didn't even use a single spell. The whole battle was mainly close combat. In the end, Cadgett still thought that Noah was a magic chanter. He was really stupid beyond belief. At that moment, Noah sighed expressionlessly and raised a hand. Two golden ripples, like water waves, suddenly fluctuated in the space on both sides of Noah's body. Two long spears popped out, like arrows knocked on a bowstring, and suddenly aimed at the two huge bone dragons. Kadjit only saw two golden lights suddenly flash in front of his eyes. That was the scene of the two long spears explosively shooting out, flying towards the two bone dragons like meteors. Chapter 1245. Ping dash. Bright flames rose up in the cemetery, turning the fiery red flames into monstrous heat waves that completely covered Noah's body. The scalding flames burned in the center of the cemetery, causing the surrounding temperature to suddenly rise, causing the atmosphere to become scalding hot. Ha 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 dash. Clementine, whose hand was twisted to an impossible angle and whose mouth was still bleeding, laughed like a maniac. Go to hell. You bastard. While laughing like this, Clementine continued to turn the short awl in her hand with a ferocious expression. Peng peng pinch peng pin dash. Suddenly, in a series of continuous explosions, waves of shocking flames exploded from the short awl in Clementine's hand, causing the thick flames to carry a scalding heat wave and expand in the surroundings. Seeing this scene, Kadjit, who was retreating in a sorry state due to his fear of Noah, couldn't help but be overjoyed. Clementine's weapon had an additional spell that could accumulate magic. This additional spell could accumulate all kinds of magic and store all of these magic in the weapon, allowing Clementine's short awl to have the ability to use all kinds of magic. It could be considered a rather special magic tool. However, the magic accumulated in the weapon was the same as other consumable magic tools. Each time it was used, it would be used up, unless new magic was injected and accumulated. Now, Clementine had released the third-rank spell accumulated in the short awl, Fireball, all at once. Being bombarded by so many third-rank spells at close range, Kadjit didn't believe that anyone could survive unscathed. Unfortunately, the joy on Kadjit's face quickly froze as he thought this. Because, in the center of the surging flames, a black shadow quietly appeared. Swish dash. A hand suddenly reached out from the magma-like flames at an extremely shocking speed. Clementine, who was immersed in the pleasure of using violence, didn't even have time to react before her neck was directly grabbed by the hand that suddenly reached out from the flames in front of her. Then, that hand was like a pair of pliers, slowly tightening. Goo dash. Clementine's maniacal laughter from a second ago was immediately replaced by a suffocating sound of anguish. Her hands almost subconsciously tightened around the hand that was strangling her neck, and her beast-like face began to turn red. It was only at this moment that another hand reached out from the scorching flames. As if dispelling the smoke, it suddenly waved. Ping dash. Accompanied by a muffled explosion, the flames that carried an astonishing amount of heat were directly scattered, turning into sparks that filled the sky and gradually disappeared. You seem to like violence. Noah, who was completely unscathed, held Clementine tightly. He looked at Clementine, whose face was starting to turn red. His eyes flashed with a cold light as he looked at Clementine, who was being held in the air by him.